22 News, your local news leader, working for Northampton. How can you protect yourself from severe storms in western Massachusetts? All you have to do is serve it, baby. Stay ahead of the storm. Accurate, up-to-the-minute weather forecasts. Special storm team reports on the web. WWLP.com. We've made it even better. The latest up-to-the-minute 22 storm team weather forecast. All you have to do is serve it, baby. WWLP.com and 22 News, working for you.
Watch early, watch often. 22 News First Look, starting at 5.
Tonight, 22 News is working for you in Boston. Focus, the presidential debate.
Good evening and welcome to 22 News special coverage of the first of 3 presidential debates. I'm Barry Krieger. The stage is set for the much-anticipated verbal slugfest between the men who want to be your president, Vice President Al Gore and Republican Texas Governor George W. Bush. 22 News has the most extensive live debate coverage of any Western Massachusetts news-gathering organization. My partner, Brenda Garten, has been in Boston most of the last 2 days, and she joins us live now from Boston. Brenda?
Barry, the main event takes place here in Massachusetts just moments from now. It's a night opinions will be formed here in Boston, opinions that the candidates hope will translate into votes on their tight race down to the White House. It's been a long road to the White House, a road that started in New Hampshire, wound its way through Iowa and primaries throughout the country, and now makes a major stop here in Boston at the University of Massachusetts Boston campus. The debate taking place just moments from now. It's a chance that the candidates can speak one-on-one to the American voter. Not the sound bites, the snippets in the newscasts or the campaign commercials, but they can speak from their heart, and that's what we're expected to see tonight in just a moment. We can only imagine what the candidates are feeling now, moments before they go on stage to face off against each other for the first time in this race. Vice President Al Gore will be showcasing his strengths in foreign policy, that he's in the number 2 spot right now and he can lead the country. On the other hand, Governor George W. Bush will be spotlighting his grasp of domestic issues important to our country, hoping to prove he can lead the country. It's been said that this debate could be Al Gore's to lose. He can't afford to make a mistake. Meanwhile, Governor Bush needs to prove that he's up to the job, and we'll see if there are any surprises in store tonight. We're told that outside Debate Hall there are some 10,000 protesters lined up showcasing their cause. But we'll see what the candidates have to say just moments from now. Also in Boston tonight, we're told that Ralph Nader of the Green Party and Patrick Buchanan of the Reform Party will be holding their own debate later, a mini debate. They, of course, not invited to participate in tonight's debate at UMass Boston campus. That's the scene here now from Boston. The entire city geared up for the big debate tonight that could determine the future of this political race for president. Barry, I'm Brenda Garten reporting live. Now back to you in Massachusetts on the western side.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Maybe the entire country and the entire world geared up to see what happens tonight. And we invite you to stay with 22 News throughout the night. Immediately following the debate, Sonia Baghdadi will be speaking with a special panel that we have assembled in our studios, residents and community leaders, and hear their reaction. Also, make your impressions known as well. Log on to 22 News Interactive and visit our website. We will give you results of your impressions coming up on 22 News at 11. Right now, the presidential debate between Al Gore and George W. Bush.
And they will be conducted within formats and rules agreed to by the commission and the 2 campaigns. Tonight's will have the candidates at podiums. No answer to a question can exceed 2 minutes. Rebuttals are limited to 1 minute. But as moderator, I have the option to follow up and to extend any particular give and take another 3.5 minutes. But even then, no single answer can exceed 2 minutes. The candidates, under their rules, may not question each other directly. There will be no opening statements, but each candidate may have up to 2 minutes for a closing statement. The questions and the subjects were chosen by me alone. I have told no one from the 2 campaigns or the commission or anyone else involved what they are. There's a small audience in the hall tonight. They are not here to participate, only to listen. I have asked and they have agreed to remain silent for the next 90 minutes, except for right now, when they will applaud as we welcome the 2 candidates, Governor Bush and Vice President Gore. And now the first question, as determined by a flip of a coin, it goes to Vice President Gore. Vice President Gore, you have questioned whether Governor Bush has the experience to be President of the United States. What exactly do you mean?
Well, Jim, first of all, I would like to thank the sponsors of this debate and the people of Boston for hosting the debate. I'd like to thank Governor Bush for participating, and I'd like to say I'm happy to be here with Tipper and our family. I have actually not questioned Governor Bush's experience. I have questioned his proposals, and here's why. I think this is a very important moment for our country. We have achieved extraordinary prosperity, and in this election, America has to make an important choice. Will we use our prosperity to enrich not just the few, but all of our families? I believe we have to make the right and responsible choices. If I'm entrusted with the presidency, here are the choices that I will make. I'll balance the budget every year. I will pay down the national debt. I will put Medicare and Social Security in a lockbox and protect them. And I will cut taxes for middle-class families. I believe it's important to resist the temptation to squander our surplus. If we make the right choices, we can have a prosperity that endures and enriches all of our people. If I'm entrusted with the presidency, I will help parents and strengthen families. Because, you know, if we have prosperity that grows and grows, we still won't be successful unless we strengthen families by, for example, ensuring that children can always go to schools that are safe, by giving parents the tools to protect their children against cultural pollution. I will make sure that we invest in our country and our families. And I mean investing in education, health care, the environment, and middle-class tax cuts and retirement security. That's my agenda, and that's why I think that it's not just a question of experience.
Governor Bush, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, we do come from different places. I come from West Texas. I've been a governor. The governor is the chief executive officer and learns how to set agendas. And I think you're going to find the difference reflected in our budgets. I want to take 1/2 of the surplus and dedicate it to Social Security, 1/4 of the surplus for important projects, and I want to send 1/4 of the surplus back to the people who pay the bills. I want everybody who pays taxes to have their tax rates cut. Now that stands in contrast to my worthy opponent's plan, which will increase the size of government dramatically. His plan is 3 times larger than President Clinton's proposed plan 8 years ago. It's a plan that will have 200 new programs as well, or expanded programs. It'll create 20,000 new bureaucrats. In other words, it empowers Washington. And tonight you're going to hear that my passion and my vision is to empower Americans to be able to make decisions for themselves in their own lives.
So I take it by your answer then, Mr. Vice President, that in your an interview recently with the New York Times, when you said that you questioned whether or not Governor Bush was experienced enough to be president, you were talking about strictly policy differences.
Yes, Jim. I said that his tax cut plan, for example, raises the question of whether it's the right choice for the country. And let me give you an example of what I mean. Under Governor Bush's tax cut proposal, he would spend more money on tax cuts for the wealthiest 1% than all of the new spending that he proposes for education, health care, prescription drugs, and national defense all combined. Now, I think those are the wrong priorities. Now, under my proposal, for every dollar that I propose in spending for things like education and health care, I will put another dollar into middle-class tax cuts. And for every dollar that I spend in those 2 categories, I'll put $2 toward paying down the national debt. I think it's very important to keep the debt going down and completely eliminate it. And I also think it's very important to go to the next stage of welfare reform. Our country has cut welfare rolls in half. I've fought hard from my days in the Senate and as vice president to cut the welfare rolls, and we've moved millions of people in America into good jobs. But it's now time for the next stage of welfare reform and include fathers and not only mothers.
We're going to get to a lot of those. Yes, go ahead, Governor.
Well, let me just say that obviously tonight we're going to hear some phony numbers about what I think and what we ought to do. People need to know that over the next 10 years there's going to be $25 trillion of revenue that comes into our treasury. We anticipate spending $21 trillion. And my plan says, why don't we pass $1.3 trillion of that back to the people who pay the bills? Surely we can afford 5% of the $25 trillion that are coming to the Treasury to the hardworking people who pay bills. There's a difference of opinion. My opponent thinks the government, the surplus is the government's money. That's not what I think. I think it's the hardworking people in America's money, and I want to share some of that money with you. So you've got more money to build and save and dream for families. It's a difference of opinion. It's the difference between government making decisions for you and you getting more of your money to make decisions for yourself.
Jim?
So let me just follow up one quick question. When you hear Vice President Gore question your experience, do you read it the same way, that he's talking about policy differences only?
Yes. I take him for his word. I mean, I fully recognize I'm not of Washington. I'm from Texas. And he's got a lot of experience, but so do I. And I've been the chief executive officer of the second biggest state in the union. I've had a proud record of working with both Republicans and Democrats, which is what our nation needs. We need somebody who can come up to Washington and say, look, let's forget politics and all the finger pointing and get some positive things done on Medicare and prescription drugs and Social Security. And so I take him for his word.
Jim, if I could just
quick,
respond.
we need to move on. Yes, sir.
I know that. The governor used the phrase phony numbers. But if you look at the plan and add the numbers up, these numbers are correct. He spends more money for tax cuts for the wealthiest 1% than all of his new spending proposals for health care, prescription drugs, education, and national defense all combined. I agree that the surplus is the American people's money. It's your money. That's why I don't think we should give nearly half of it to the wealthiest 1%, because the other 99% have had an awful lot to do with building this surplus and our prosperity.
Our 3.5 minutes is up. New question.
I hope it's about wealthy people.
Governor Bush, you have a question. This is a companion question to the question I asked Vice President Gore. You have questioned whether Vice President Gore has demonstrated the leadership qualities necessary to be President of the United States. What do you mean?
Well, here's what I've said, Jim. I've said that 8 years ago they campaigned on prescription drugs for seniors. And 4 years ago they campaigned on getting prescription drugs for seniors. And now they're campaigning on getting prescription drugs for seniors. It seems like they can't get it done. Now, they may blame other folks, but it's time to get somebody in Washington who's going to work with both Republicans and Democrats to get some positive things done when it comes to our seniors. And so what I've said is there's been some missed opportunities. They've had a chance. They've had a chance to form consensus. I've got a plan on Medicare, for example, the state's plan that says we're going to have immediate help for seniors and what I call immediate helping hand, a $48 billion program. But I also want to say to seniors, if you're happy with Medicare the way it is, fine, you can stay in the program. But we're going to give you additional choices, just like they give federal employees in the Federal Employee Health Plan. From which is used, so should seniors. And my point has been, as opposed to politicizing an issue like Medicare, in other words, holding it up as an issue, hoping somebody bites it and then try to clobber them over the head with it for political purposes. This year, in the year 2000, it's time to say, let's get it done once and for all. And that's what I have been critical about the administration for. Same in Social Security. I think there was a good opportunity to bring Republicans and Democrats together to reform the Social Security system so the seniors will never go without. Those on Social Security today will have their promise made. But also to give younger workers the option at their choice of being able to manage some of their own money in the private sectors to make sure there's a Social Security system around tomorrow. There's a lot of young workers at our rallies we go to that when they hear that I'm going to trust them at their option to be able to manage under certain guidelines some of their own money to get a better rate of return so that they'll have a retirement plan in the future, they begin to nod their heads, and they want a different attitude in Washington.
1 minute rebuttal. Vice President Gore.
Well, Jim, under my plan, all seniors will get prescription drugs under Medicare. The governor has described Medicare as a government HMO. It's not, and let me explain the difference. Under the Medicare prescription drug proposal I'm making, here's how it works. You go to your own doctor, and your doctor chooses your prescription, and no HMO or insurance company can take those choices away from you. Then you go to your own pharmacy, you fill the prescription, and Medicare pays half the cost. If you're in a very poor family or if you have very high costs, Medicare will pay all the costs. A $25 premium and much better benefits than you could possibly find in the private sector. Now here's the contrast. 95% of all seniors would get no help whatsoever under my opponent's plan for the first 4 or 5 years. Now, one thing I don't understand, Jim, is why is it that the wealthiest 1% get their tax cuts the first year, but 95% of seniors have to wait 4 to 5 years before they get a single penny?
Keller? I guess my answer to that is the man's running on Medicare, trying to frighten people in the voting booth. That's just not the way I think, and that's just not my intentions. It's not my plan. I want all seniors to have prescription drugs in Medicare. We need to reform Medicare. There's been an opportunity to do so, but this administration has failed to do it. And so seniors are going to have not only a Medicare plan where the poor seniors will have their prescription drugs paid for, but there will be a variety of options. The current system today has meant a lot for a lot of seniors, and I really appreciate the intentions of the current system. And as I mentioned, if you're happy with the system, you can stay in it. But there's a lot of procedures that have not kept up in Medicare with the current times. There's no prescription drug benefits, there's no drug therapies, there's no preventing medicines, there's no vision care. I mean, we need to have a modern system to help seniors. And the idea of supporting a federally controlled 132,000 page document bureaucracy as being a compassionate way for seniors and the only compassionate source of care for seniors is just not my vision. I believe we ought to give seniors more options. I believe we ought to make the system work better. But I know this. I know it's going to require a different kind of leader to go to Washington to say to both Republicans and Democrats, let's come together. You've had your chance, Vice President. You've been there for 8 years, and nothing has been done. And my point is that my plan not only trusts seniors with options, my plan sets aside $3.4 trillion for Medicare over the next 10 years. My plan also says it's going to require a new approach in Washington, D.C. It's going to require somebody who can work across the partisan divide.
If I could respond to that, Jim, under my plan, I will put Medicare in an ironclad lockbox and prevent the money from being used for anything other than Medicare. The governor has declined to endorse that idea, even though the Republican as well as Democratic leaders of Congress have endorsed it. I'd be interested if he would this evening say that he would put Medicare in a lockbox. I don't think he will, because under his plan, if you work out the numbers, $100 billion comes out of Medicare just for the wealthiest 1% in the tax cut. Now here is the difference. Some people who say the word reform actually mean cuts. Under the governor's plan, if you kept the same fee-for-service that you have now under Medicare, your premiums would go up by between 18 and 47%, and that's the study of the congressional plan that he's modeled his proposal on by the Medicare actuaries. Let me just give you one quick example. There's a man here tonight named George McKinney from Milwaukee. He's 70 years old. He has high blood pressure. His wife has heart trouble. They have income of $25,000 a year. They cannot pay for their prescription drugs, and so they're some of the ones that go to Canada regularly in order to get their prescription drugs. Under my plan, half of their costs would be paid right away. Under Governor Bush's plan, they would get not one penny for 4 to 5 years, and then they would be forced to go into an HMO or to an insurance company and ask them for coverage, but there'd be no limit on the premiums or the deductibles or any of the terms and conditions.
I cannot let this go by, the old-style Washington politics. We're going to scare you in the voting booth. Under my plan, the man gets immediate help with prescription drugs. It's called immediate helping hand. Instead of squabbling and finger-pointing, he gets immediate help. Let me say something. Now, I understand.
Excuse me,
Jim, can I...
minutes is up, but we'll finish this.
Can I make one other point?
Wait a minute.
They get $25,000 a year income. That makes them ineligible.
Look, this is a man, he's got great numbers. He talks about numbers. I'm beginning to think not only did he invent the internet, but he invented the calculator. It's fuzzy math. It's a scaring, trying to scare people in the voting booth. Under my tax plan that he continues to criticize, I set a third. No, the federal government should take no more than a third of anybody's check. But I also dropped the bottom rate from 15% to 10%, because by far the vast majority of the help goes to people at the bottom end of the economic ladder. If you're a family of 4 in Massachusetts making $50,000, you get a 50% cut in the federal income taxes you pay. It's from $4,000 to about $2,000. Now, the difference in our plans is I want that $2,000 to go to you.
All right,
And the Vice President would like to be spending the $2,000 on your behalf.
One quick thing, gentlemen. These are your rules. I'm doing my best. We're way over the 3.5. I have no problems with it, but you want to have a quick response, and we'll move on. We're already to almost 5 minutes on this.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's just clear. You can go to the website and look. If you make more than $25,000 a year, you don't get a penny of help under the Bush prescription drug proposal for at least 4 to 5 years, and then you're pushed into a Medicare, into an HMO or an insurance company plan, and there's no limit on the premiums or the deductibles or any of the conditions, and the insurance companies say it won't work and they won't offer these plans.
Let me ask you about this, and we'll move on this subject. As a practical matter, both of you want to bring prescription drugs to seniors, correct?
Correct, but the difference is I want to bring it to 100%, and he brings it only to 5%.
That's just totally false. Wait a minute, it's just totally false for him to stand up here and say that. Let me make sure the seniors hear me loud and clear. They've had their chance to get something done. I'm going to work with both Republicans and Democrats to reform the system. All seniors will be covered. All poor seniors will have their prescription drugs paid for. In the meantime, we're going to have a plan to help poor seniors. And in the meantime, could be 1 year or 2 years.
Okay,
I don't know.
Let me call your attention to the key word there. He said all poor seniors.
No, wait a minute. All seniors are covered under prescription drugs in my plan.
In the first year?
If we can get it done in the first year, you bet. Yours is phased in 8 years.
No. It's a 2-phase plan, Jim. And for the first 4 years, it takes a year to pass it. And then for the first 4 years, only the poor are covered. Middle-class seniors like George McKinney and his wife are not covered for 4 to 5 years.
I've got an idea.
Okay.
If you have any more to say about this, you can say it in your closing statements. We'll move on, okay? New question. Vice President Gore, how would you contrast your approach to preventing future oil price and supply problems like we have now to the approach of Governor Bush?
Excellent question, and here's the simple difference. My plan has not only a short-term component, but also a long-term component. And it focuses not only on increasing the supply, which I think we have to do, but also on working on the consumption side. Now, in the short term, we have to free ourselves from the domination of the big oil companies that have the ability to manipulate the price, from OPEC when they want to raise the price. And in the long term, we have to give new incentives for the development of domestic resources like deep gas in the Western Gulf, like stripper wells for oil, but also renewable sources of energy and domestic sources that are cleaner and better. And I'm proposing a plan that will give tax credits and tax incentives for the rapid development of new kinds of cars and trucks and buses and factories and boilers and furnaces that don't have as much pollution, that don't burn as much energy, and that help us get out on the cutting edge of the new technologies that will create millions of new jobs, because when we sell these new products here, we'll then be able to sell them overseas, and there's a ravenous demand for them overseas. Now, another big difference is Governor Bush is proposing to open up some of our most precious environmental treasures, like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, to the big oil companies to go in and start producing oil there. I think that is the wrong choice. It would only give us a few months' worth of oil, and the oil wouldn't start flowing for many years into the future. And I don't think it's a fair price to pay to destroy precious parts of America's environment. We have to bet on the future and move beyond the current technologies to have a whole new generation of more efficient, cleaner energy technologies.
Governor Bush, 1 minute.
Well, it's an issue I know a lot about. I was a small oil person for a while in West Texas. This is an administration that's had no plan. And all of a sudden, the results of having no plan have caught up with America. First and foremost, we got to make sure we fully fund LIHEAP, which is a a way to help low-income folks, particularly here in the East, pay for their high fuel bills. Secondly, we need an active exploration program in America. The only way to become less dependent on foreign sources of crude oil is to explore at home. And you bet I want to open up a small part of a part of Alaska, because when that field is online, it will produce 1 million barrels a day. Today, we import 1 million barrels from Saddam Hussein. I would rather that 1 million come from our own hemisphere, our own country, as opposed from Saddam Hussein. I want to build more pipelines to move natural gas throughout this hemisphere. I want to develop the coal resources in America and have clean coal technologies. We've got abundant supplies of energy here in America, and we better get after it and better start exploring it. Otherwise, we're going to be in deep trouble in the future because of our dependency upon foreign sources of crude.
So, if somebody is watching tonight, listening to what the two of you just said, is it fair to say, okay, the differences between Vice President Gore and George W. Bush, or Governor Bush, are the following? You are for doing something on the consumption end, you're for doing something on the production and drilling.
Let me clarify. I'm for doing something both on the supply side and production side and on the consumption side. And let me say that I found one thing in Governor Bush's answer that we certainly agree on, and that's the low-income heating assistance program, and I commend you for supporting that. I worked to get $400 million just a couple of weeks ago, and to establish a permanent home heating oil reserve here in the Northeast. Now, as for the proposals that I've worked for renewables and conservation and efficiency and the new technologies, the fact is, for the last few years in the Congress, we faced a lot of opposition to them. They've only approved about 10% of the agenda that I've helped to send up there. And I think that we need to get serious about this energy crisis, both in the Congress and in the White House. And if you entrust me with the presidency, I will tackle this problem and focus on new technologies that will make us less dependent on big oil or foreign oil.
How would you draw the difference?
Well, I would first say that you should have been tackling it for the last 7 years. And secondly, the difference is that we need to explore at home. And the Vice President doesn't believe in exploration, for example, in Alaska. There's a lot of shut-in gas that we need to be moving out of Alaska by pipeline. There's an interesting issue up in the Northwest as well, and that is whether or not we remove dams that produce hydroelectric energy. I'm against removing dams in the Northwest. I don't know where the Vice President stands, but that's a renewable source of energy we need to keep in line. I was in coal country yesterday in West Virginia. There's an abundant supply of coal in America. I know we can do a better job of clean coal technologies. I'm going to ask the Congress for $2 billion to make sure that we have the cleanest coal technologies in the world. My answer to you is that in the short term, we need to get after it here in America. We need to explore our resources, and we need to develop our reservoirs of domestic production. We also need to have a hemispheric energy policy where Canada and Mexico and the United States come together. I brought this up recently with Vicente Fox, who's the newly elected president. He's a man I know from Mexico, and I talked about how best to be able to expedite the exploration of natural gas in Mexico and transport it up to the United States so we become less dependent on foreign sources of crude oil. This is a major problem facing America. The administration did not deal with it. It's time for a new administration to deal with the energy problem.
If I just briefly, Jim, I know I found a couple of other things that we agree on, and we may not find that many this evening, so I wanted to emphasize them. I strongly support the new investments in clean coal technology. I made a proposal 3 months ago on this, and also domestic exploration, yes, but not in the environmental treasures of our country. We don't have to do that. That's the wrong choice. I know the oil companies have been itching to do that, but it is not the right thing for the future.
No, it's the right thing for the consumers. Less dependency upon foreign sources of crude is good for consumers, and we can do so in an environmentally friendly way.
Well, can I have the last word on this?
New question.
Of course.
Okay,
New
go ahead.
question, new subject.
All right.
Governor Bush, if elected president, would you try to overturn the FDA's approval last week of the abortion pill RU-486?
I don't think a president can do that. I was disappointed in the ruling because I think abortions ought to be more rare in America. And I'm worried that that pill will create more abortion, will cause more people to have abortions. This is a very important topic, and it's a very sensitive topic because a lot of good people disagree on the issue. I think what the next president ought to do is to promote a culture of life in America. Is a life of the elderly and life of those living all across the country, life of the unborn. As a matter of fact, I think a noble goal for this country is that every child, born and unborn, ought to be protected in law and welcomed into life. But I know we got to change a lot of minds before we get there in America. What I do believe is we can find good common ground on issues like parental notification or parental consent. And I know we need to ban partial birth abortions. This is a place where my opponent and I have strong disagreements. I believe banning partial birth abortion would be a positive step toward reducing the number of abortions in America. This is an issue that's going to require a new attitude. We've been battling over abortion for a long period of time. Surely this nation can come together to promote the value of life. Surely we can fight off these laws that will encourage doctors to allow doctors to take the lives of our seniors. Surely we can work together to create a culture of life so some of these youngsters who feel like they can take a neighbor's life with a gun will understand that that's not the way America is meant to be. And surely we can find common ground to reduce the number of abortions in America. As to the drug itself, I mentioned I was disappointed. I hope the FDA took its time to make sure that American women will be safe who use this drug.
Vice President Gore?
Well, Jim, the FDA took 12 years, and I do support that decision. They determined it was medically safe for the women who use that drug. Now, this is indeed a very important issue. First of all, on the issue of partial birth or so-called late-term abortion, I would sign a law banning that procedure, provided that doctors have the ability to save a woman's life or to act if her health is severely at risk. And that's not the main issue. The main issue is whether or not the Roe v. Wade decision is going to be overturned. I support a woman's right to choose. My opponent does not. It is important because the next president is going to appoint 3, maybe even 4 justices of the Supreme Court. And Governor Bush has declared to the anti-choice groups that he will appoint justices in the mold of Scalia and Clarence Thomas, who are known for being the most vigorous opponents of a woman's right to choose. Here's the difference. He trusts the government to order a woman to do what it thinks she ought to do. I trust women to make the decisions that affect their lives, their destinies, and their bodies. And I think a woman's right to choose ought to be protected and defended.
Governor, we'll go to the Supreme Court question in a moment, but make sure I understand your position on RU 486. If you're elected president, will you, not through appointments to the FDA, you won't support legislation to overturn this?
I don't think a president can unilaterally overturn it. I think the FDA's made its decision.
But it means you wouldn't through appointments to the FDA and ask them to reappraise it?
I think once the decision's made, it's been made. Now, unless it's proven to be unsafe to women.
Well, Jim, you know, the question you asked, if I heard you correctly, was would he support legislation to overturn it? And if I heard the statement day before yesterday, you said he said he would order his FDA appointee to review the decision. And now that sounds to me a little bit different. And I just think that we ought to support the decision.
I said I would make sure that women would be safe who use the drug.
All right, on the Supreme Court question, should a voter assume, you're pro-life, you just stated your position, should a voter assume that all judicial appointments you make to the Supreme Court or any other court, federal court, will also be pro-life?
Voters should assume that I have no litmus test on that issue or any other issue. But the voters will know I'll put competent judges on the bench, people who will strictly interpret the Constitution and will not use the bench to write social policy. And that's going to be a big difference between my opponent and me. I believe that the judges ought not to take the place of the legislative branch of government, that they're appointed for life, and that they ought to look at the Constitution as sacred. They shouldn't misuse their bench. I don't believe in liberal activist judges. I believe in strict constructionists, and those are the kind of judges I will appoint. I've named 4 Supreme Court judges in the state of Texas, and I would ask the people to check out their qualifications, their deliberations. They're good, solid men and women who have made good, sound judgments on behalf of the people of Texas.
What kind of appointment should they expect from you?
Both of us use similar language to reach an exactly opposite outcome. I don't favor litmus tests, but I know that there are ways to assess how a potential justice interprets the Constitution. And in my view, the Constitution ought to be interpreted as a document that grows with our country and our history. And I believe, for example, that there is a right of privacy in the Fourth Amendment. And when the phrase "a strict constructionist" is used, and when the names of Scalia and Thomas are used as benchmarks for who would be appointed, those are code words, and nobody should mistake this for saying that the governor would appoint people who would overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, it's very clear to me, and I would appoint people who have a philosophy that I think would make it quite likely that they would uphold Roe v. Wade.
Is the Vice President right? Is that a code word for overturning Roe v. Wade?
Sounds like the Vice President's not very right many times tonight. I just told you the criterion of which I'll appoint judges. I've had a record of appointing judges in the state of Texas. That's what a governor gets to do. A governor gets to name Supreme Court judges, and I've given him that. He also reads all kinds of things into my tax plan, into my Medicare plan, and I just want the viewers out there to listen to what I have to say about it.
That's a yes.
Reverse the question. What code phrases should we read by what you said about what kind of people you will appoint to the U.S.
It would be very likely that they'd uphold Roe v. Wade, but I do believe it's wrong to use a litmus test. But if you look at the history of a lower court judge's rulings, you can get a pretty good idea of how they're going to interpret questions. Now, a lot of questions are of first impression, and these questions that have been seen many times come up in a new context. And so, but you know, this is a very important issue because a lot of young women in this country take this right for granted, and it could be lost. It is on the ballot in this election. Make no mistake about it.
I'll tell you what kind of judges he'll put on there. He'll put liberal, activist judges who will use their bench to subvert the legislature. That's what he'll do.
And that's not right.
New subject, new question. Vice President Gore, if President Milosevic of Yugoslavia refuses to accept the election results and leave office, what action, if any, should the United States take to get him out of there?
Well, Milosevic has lost the election. His opponent, Kostunica, has won the election. It's overwhelming. Milosevic's government refuses to release the vote count. There's now a general strike going on. They're demonstrating. I think we should support the people of Serbia and the Yugoslavia, as they call Serbia plus Montenegro, and put pressure in every way possible to recognize the lawful outcome of the election. The people of Serbia have acted very bravely in kicking this guy out of office. Now he is trying to not release the votes and then go straight to a so-called runoff election without even announcing the results of the first vote. Now, we've made it clear, along with our allies, that when Milosevic leaves, then Serbia will be able to have a more normal relationship with the rest of the world. That is a very strong incentive that we have given them to do the right thing. Bear in mind also, Milosevic has been indicted as a war criminal, and he should be held accountable for his actions. Now, we have to take measured steps because the sentiment within Serbia is, for understandable reasons, still against the United States because their nationalism has led, even if they don't like Milosevic, they still have some feelings lingering from the NATO action there. So we have to be intelligent in the way we go about it. But make no mistake about it, we should do everything we can to see that the will of the Serbian people expressed in this extraordinary election is done. And I hope that he'll be out of office very shortly.
Governor Bush, 1 minute.
Well, I'm pleased with the results of the election. As the Vice President is, it's time for the man to go. And it means that the United States must have a strong diplomatic hand with our friends in NATO. That's why it's important to make sure our alliances are as strong as they possibly can be to keep the pressure on Mr. Milosevic. But this will be an interesting moment for the Russians to step up and lead as well. It'll be a wonderful time for the President of Russia to step into the Balkans and convince Mr. Milosevic it's in his best interest and his country's best interest to leave office. The Russians have got a lot of sway in that part of the world, and we'd like to see them use that sway to encourage democracy to take hold. And so it's an encouraging election. It's time for the man to leave.
But what if he doesn't leave, Mr. Vice? What if all the things, all the diplomatic efforts, all the pressure from all over the world, and he still doesn't go? Is this the kind of thing, to be specific, that you as president would consider the use of U.S. military force to get him gone?
In this particular situation, no. Bear in mind that we have a lot of sanctions in force against Serbia right now. And the people of Serbia know that they can escape all those sanctions if this guy is turned out of power. Now, I understand what the governor has said about asking the Russians to be involved, and under some circumstances that might be a good idea. But being as they have not yet been willing to recognize Kostunica as the lawful winner of the election, I'm not sure that it's right for us to invite the president of Russia to mediate this dispute there, because we might not like the result that comes out of that. They currently favor going forward with a runoff election. I think that's the wrong thing. I think the governor's instinct is not necessarily bad, because we have worked with the Russians in a constructive way in Kosovo, for example, to end the conflict there. But I think we need to be very careful in the present situation before we invite the Russians to play the lead role in mediating.
Well, obviously we wouldn't use the Russians if they didn't agree with our answer, Mr. Vice President.
Well, they don't.
But let me say this to you. I wouldn't use force. I wouldn't use force.
You wouldn't use force?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not in our national interest to use force in this case. I would keep pressure. I would use diplomacy. There's a difference between what the president did, who I supported, in Kosovo, and this. And it's up to the people in this region to figure out how to take control of their country.
New question. How would you go about, as president, deciding when it was in the national interest to use U.S. force, generally?
Well, if it's in our vital national interests, and that means whether or not our territory or territory is threatened, or people could be harmed, whether or not our alliances, our defense alliances are threatened, whether or not our friends in the Middle East are threatened, that would be a time to seriously consider the use of force. Secondly, whether or not the mission was clear, whether or not it was a clear understanding as to what the mission would be. Thirdly, whether or not we were prepared and trained to win, whether or not our forces were of high morale and high standing and well equipped. And finally, whether or not there was an exit strategy. I would take the use of force very seriously. I would be guarded in my approach. I don't think we can be all things to all people in the world. I think we got to be very careful when we commit our troops. The Vice President and I have a disagreement about the use of troops. He believes in nation building. I would be very careful about using our troops as nation builders. I believe the role of the military is to fight and win war, and therefore prevent war from happening in the first place. And so I take my responsibility seriously. And it starts with making sure we rebuild our military power. Morale in today's military is too low. We're having trouble meeting recruiting goals. We met the goals this year, but in the previous years we have not met recruiting goals. Some of our troops are not well equipped. I believe we're overextended in too many places. And therefore, I want to rebuild the military power. It starts with $1 billion pay raise for the men and women who wear the uniform, $1 billion more than the president recently signed into law. It's to make sure our troops are well housed and well equipped, bonus plans to keep some of our high-skilled folks in the services, and a commander-in-chief who clearly sets the mission. And the mission is to fight and win war, and therefore prevent war from happening in the first place.
Vice President Gore, 1 minute.
Let me tell you what I'll do. First of all, I want to make it clear, our military is the strongest, best trained, best equipped, best led fighting force in the world and in the history of the world. Nobody should have any doubt about that, least of all our adversaries or potential adversaries. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will do whatever is necessary in order to make sure our forces stay the strongest in the world. In fact, in my 10-year budget proposal, I have set aside more than twice as much for this purpose as Governor Bush has in his proposal. Now, I think we should be reluctant to get involved in some place in a foreign country. But if our national security is at stake, if we have allies, if we've tried every other course, if we're sure military action will succeed, and if the costs are proportionate to the benefits,
we should get involved. Now, just because we don't want to get involved everywhere, it doesn't mean we should back off anywhere it comes up. And I disagree with the proposal that maybe only when oil supplies are at stake then our national security is at risk. I think that there are situations like in Bosnia or Kosovo where there's a genocide where our national security is at stake there.
Governor? I agree that our military is the strongest in the world today. That's not the question. The question is it will be the strongest in years to come. And the warning signs are real. Everywhere I go around the campaign trail, I see people who are moms and dads whose son or daughter may wear the uniform, and they tell me about how discouraged their son or daughter may be. If recent poll was taken amongst 1,000 enlisted personnel, as well as officers, over half of whom are going to leave the service when their time of enlistment is up. The captains are leaving the service. There is a problem, and it's going to require a new commander-in-chief to rebuild the military power. The other day, I was honored to be flanked by Colin Powell and General Norman Schwarzkopf, who stood by my side and agreed with me. They said we can, even though we're the strongest military, that if we don't do something quickly, if we don't have a clearer vision of the military, if we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that. I'm going to rebuild our military power. It's one of the major priorities of my administration.
Vice President Gore, how should the voters go about deciding which one of you is better suited to make the kinds of decisions we've been doing, whether it's Milosevic or whether it's whatever, in the military and foreign policy area?
Well, they should look at our proposals and look at us as people and make up their own minds. When I was a young man, I volunteered for the Army. I served my country in Vietnam. My father was a senator who strongly opposed the Vietnam War. I went to college in this great city, and most of my peers felt against the war as I did. But I went anyway, because I knew if I didn't, somebody else in the small town of Carthage, Tennessee, would have to go in my place. I served for 8 years in the House of Representatives, and I served on the Intelligence Committee, specialized in looking at arms control. I served for 8 years in the United States Senate and served on the Armed Services Committee. For the last 8 years, I've served on the National Security Council. And when the conflict came up in Bosnia, I saw a genocide in the heart of Europe with the most violent war on the continent of Europe since World War II. Look, that's where World War I started, in the Balkans. My uncle was a victim of poison gas there. Millions of Americans saw the results of that conflict. We have to be willing to make good, sound judgments. And incidentally, I know the value of making sure our troops have the latest technology. The governor's proposed skipping the next generation of weapons. I think that's a big mistake, because I think we have to stay at the cutting edge.
Governor, how would you advise the voters to make the decision on this issue?
I think you've got to look at how one has handled responsibility in office. Whether or not, it's the same in domestic policy as well, Jim, whether or not you've got the capacity to convince people to follow. Whether or not one makes decisions based upon sound principles, or whether or not you rely upon polls and focus groups on how to decide what the course of action is. We've got too much polling and focus groups going on in Washington today. We need decisions made on sound principles. I've been the governor of a big state. I think one of the hallmarks of my relationship in Austin, Texas is that I've had the capacity to work with both Republicans and Democrats. I think that's an important part of leadership. I think what it means to build consensus. I've shown I know how to do so. As a matter of fact, tonight in the audience, there's one elected state senator who's a Democrat, a former state rep who's a Democrat, one statewide officer who's a Democrat. I mean, there's a lot of Democrats who are here in the debate.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because they want to show their support that shows I know how to lead. And so the fundamental answer to your question, who can lead and who has shown the ability to get things done?
If I could say,
all right, we're way over the 3.5 minutes. Go ahead.
I think one of the key points in foreign policy and national security policy is the need to reestablish the old-fashioned principle that politics ought to stop at the water's edge. When I was in the United States Congress, I worked with former President Reagan to modernize our strategic weaponry and to pursue arms control in a responsible way. When I was in the United States Senate, I worked with former President Bush, your father, and was one of only a few Democrats in the Senate to support the Persian Gulf War. I think bipartisanship is a national asset, and we have to find ways to reestablish it in foreign policy and national security policy.
In a word, do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, why haven't they done it in 7 years?
New subject, new question. Should the voters of this election, Vice President Gore, see this on domestic area, in the domestic area, as a major choice between competing political philosophies?
Oh, absolutely. This is a very important moment in the history of our country. Look, we've got the biggest surpluses in all of American history. Well, the key question that has to be answered in this election is, will we use that prosperity wisely in a way that benefits all of our people and doesn't go just to the few? Almost half of all the tax cut benefits, as I said, under Governor Bush's plan, go to the wealthiest 1%. I think we have to make the right and responsible choices. I think we have to invest in education, protecting the environment, health care, a prescription drug benefit that goes to all seniors, not just to the poor, under Medicare, not relying on HMOs and insurance companies. I think that we have to help parents and strengthen families by dealing with the kind of inappropriate entertainment material that families are just heartsick that their children are exposed to. I think we have got to have welfare reform taken to the next stage. I think that we have got to balance the budget every single year, pay down the national debt, and in fact, under my proposal, the national debt will be completely eliminated by the year 2012. I think we need to put Medicare and Social Security in a lockbox. The governor will not put Medicare in a lockbox. I don't think it should be used as a piggy bank for other programs. I think it needs to be moved out of the budget and protected. I'll veto anything that takes money out of Social Security or Medicare for anything other than Social Security or Medicare. Now, the priorities are just very different. I'll give you a couple of examples. For every new dollar that I propose for spending on health care, Governor Bush spends $3 for a tax cut for the wealthiest 1%. Now, for every dollar that I propose to spend on education, he spends $5 on a tax cut for the wealthiest 1%. Those are very clear differences.
Governor, 1 minute.
Man's practicing fuzzy math again. There's differences. Under Vice President Gore's plan, he's going to grow the federal government in the largest increase since Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965. We're talking about a massive government, folks. We're talking about adding to or increasing 200 new programs, 200 programs, 20,000 new bureaucrats. Imagine how many IRS agents it's going to take to be able to figure out his targeted tax cut for the middle class that excludes 50 million Americans. There is a huge difference in this campaign. He says he's going to give you tax cuts. 50 million of you won't receive it. He said in his speech he wants to make sure the right people get tax relief. That's not the role of a president to decide right and wrong. Everybody who pays taxes ought to get tax relief. After my plan is in place, the wealthiest Americans will pay a higher percentage of taxes than they do today. And the poorest of Americans, 6 million families, 7 million people, won't pay any tax at all. It is a huge difference. It's the difference between big, exploding federal government that wants to think on your behalf and a plan that meets priorities and liberates working people to be able to make decisions on your own.
Let me just say, Jim, you haven't heard the governor deny these numbers. He's called them phony, he's called them fuzzy, but the fact remains, almost 30% of his proposed tax cut goes only to Americans that make more than $1 million per year. More money goes to the... Can I have a rebuttal here?
Sure, but I just want to see if he buys that.
Tell you what the facts are. The facts are, after my plan, the wealthiest of Americans pay more taxes of the percentage of the whole than they do today. Secondly, if you're a family of four making $50,000 in Massachusetts, you get a 50% tax cut. Let me give you one example. The Strunk family in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I campaigned with them the other day. They make $51,000 combined income. They pay about $3,800 in taxes, or $3,500 in taxes. Under my plan, they get $1,800 of tax relief. Under Vice President Gore's plan, they give $145 of tax relief. Now, you tell me who stands on the side of the rich. You asked the Strunks. You asked the Strunks.
If I could get my...
whose plan It makes more sense. And there's a difference of opinion. He would rather spend the Strunks $1,800, and I would rather the Strunks spend your own money.
You see it that way, Vice President?
No, I don't, and I'm not going to go to calling names on his facts. I'm just going to tell you what the real facts are. The analysis that he's talking about leaves out more than half of the tax cuts that I have proposed. And if you just add the numbers up, he still hasn't denied it. He spends more money on a tax cut for the wealthiest 1% than all of his new proposals for prescription drugs, health care, education, and national defense combined. Now, those are the wrong priorities. $665 billion over 10 years for the wealthiest 1%. Now, and as I said, almost 30% of it goes to Americans that make more than $1 million per year. Every middle-class family is eligible for a tax cut under my proposal. Let me give you some specific examples. I believe that college tuition up to $10,000 a year ought to be tax deductible so middle-class families can choose to send their children to college. I believe that all seniors should be able to choose their own doctors and get prescription drugs from their own pharmacists with Medicare paying half the bill. I believe that parents ought to have more choices with charter schools and public school choice to send their kids always to a safe school. I think we need to make education the #1 priority in our country and treat teachers like the professionals that they are, and that's why I have made it the #1 priority in my budget, not a tax cut for the wealthy.
Yeah, let me talk about tax cuts one more time. This is a man whose plan excludes 50 million Americans.
Not so.
He doesn't believe that, well, take, for example, the marriage penalty. If you itemize your tax return, you get no marriage penalty relief. He picks and chooses. He decides who the right people are. It's a fundamental difference of opinion. I want my fellow Americans to hear one more time. We're going to spend $25 trillion. We can collect $25 trillion of revenue over the next 10 years. And we're going to project it to spend $21 trillion. Now, surely we can send 5% of that back to you all who pay the bills. There's a problem. I want to say something, Jim. Wait a minute. Okay. This man's been disparaging my plan with all this Washington fuzzy math. I want you to hear a problem we've got in America. If you're a single mother making $22,000 a year and you've got 2 children, under this tax code, for every additional dollar you make, you pay a higher marginal rate on that dollar than someone making $200,000 a year, and that is not right. And so my plan drops the rate from 15% to 10% and increases the child credit from $500 to $1,000 to make the code more fair for everybody, not just a few, not just a handful. Everybody who pays taxes ought to get some relief.
All right, having cleared that up, we're going to a new question. Education. Governor Bush, both of you have promised dramatically to change dramatically public education in this country. But of the public money spent on education, only 6% of it is federal money.
Right.
You want to change 100% of public education with 6% of the money. Is that possible?
Well, I tell you, we can make a huge difference by saying if you receive federal money, we expect you to show results. Let me give you a story about public ed, if I might, Jim. It's about KIPP Academy in Houston, Texas. It's a charter school run by some people from Teach for America. Young folks that say, well, I'm going to do something good for my country. I want to teach. A guy named Michael runs the school. It's a school full of so-called at-risk children. So it's how we unfortunately label certain children. It means basically they can't learn. It's a school of strong discipline and high standards. It's one of the best schools in Houston. And here are the key ingredients: high expectations, strong accountability. What Michael says is, don't put all these rules on us. Just let us teach and hold us accountable for every grade. And that's what we do. And as a result, these young, mainly Hispanic youngsters are some of the best learners in Houston, Texas. That's my vision for public education all around America. Many of you viewers don't know, but Laura and I sent our girls to public school. We went to Austin High School, and many of the public schools are meeting the call. But unfortunately, a lot of schools are trapping children in schools that just won't teach and won't change. So here's the role of the federal government. One is to change Head Start into a reading program. 2 is to say that if you want to access reading money, you can do so, because the goal is for every single child to learn to read. There must be K-2 diagnostic tools. There's teacher training money available. 3, we've got to consolidate federal programs to free districts, to free the schools, to encourage innovators like Michael, to let schools reach out beyond the confines of the current structure to recruit Teach teach for the children-type teachers. 4, we're going to say if you receive federal money, measure 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and show us whether or not children are learning to read and write and add and subtract, and if so, there'll be a bonus plan, but if not, instead of continuing to subsidize failure, the money will go to the parent, so the parent can choose a different public school. The federal money attributed to the child will go to the parent for public school or charter school or tutorial or Catholic school. What I care about is children, and so does Michael Feinberg. And you know what? It can happen in America with the right kind of leadership.
Vice President Gore? Look, we agree on a couple of things on education. I strongly support new accountability, so does Governor Bush. I strongly support local control, so does Governor Bush. I'm in favor of testing as a way of measuring performance. Every school district, have every state test the children. I've also proposed a voluntary national test in the 4th grade and 8th grade. And a form of testing that the governor has not endorsed. I think that all new teachers ought to be tested, including in the subjects that they teach. We've got to recruit 100,000 new teachers, and I have budgeted for that. We've got to reduce the class size so that the student who walks in has more one-on-one time with the teacher. We ought to have universal preschool, and we ought to make college tuition tax deductible up to $10,000 a year. I'd like to tell you a quick story. I got a letter today as I left Sarasota, Florida. I'm here with a group of 13 people from around the country who helped me prepare, and we had a great time. But 2 days ago, we ate lunch at a restaurant, and the guy who served us lunch got me a letter today. His name is Randy Ellis. He has a 15-year-old daughter named Kaylee, who's in Sarasota High School. Her science class was supposed to be for 24 students. She is the 36th student in that classroom. Sent me a picture of her in the classroom. They can't squeeze another desk in for her, so she has to stand during class. I want the federal government, consistent with local control and new accountability, to make improvement of our schools the #1 priority, so Kaylee will have a desk and can sit down in a classroom where she can learn.
All right. So, having heard the two of you, voters have just heard the two of you, what's the difference? What's the choice between the two of you on education?
Well, the difference is there is no new accountability measures in Vice President Gore's plan. He says he's for voluntary testing. You can't have voluntary testing. You must have mandatory testing. You must say that if you receive money, you must show us whether or not children are learning to read and write and add and subtract. That's the difference. You may claim you've got mandatory testing, but you don't, Mr. Vice President, and that is a huge difference. Testing is the cornerstone of reform. You know how I know? Because it's the cornerstone of reform in the state of Texas. Republicans and Democrats came together and asked the question, what can we do to make our public education the best in the country? And we've done a long way working together to do so. And the cornerstone is to have strong accountability in return for money and in return for flexibility. We're going to ask you to show us whether or not, and we ask to post the results on the internet. We encourage parents to take a look at the comparative results of schools. We've got a strong charter school movement that I signed the legislation to get started in the state of Texas. I believe if we find poor children trapped in schools that won't teach, we need to free the parents. I think we need to expand education savings accounts. It's something Vice Presidential running mate supports. No, there's big differences of opinion. He won't support freeing local districts from the strings of federal money.
All right. How do you see the differences?
Well, first of all, I do have mandatory testing. I think the governor may not have heard what I said clearly. The voluntary national test is in addition to the mandatory testing that we require of states, all schools, all school districts, students themselves, and required teacher testing, which goes a step farther than Governor Bush has been willing to go. Here are a couple of differences, though, Jim. Governor Bush is in favor of vouchers, which take taxpayer money away from public schools and give them to private schools that are not accountable for how the money is used and don't have to take all applicants. Now, private schools play a great role in our society. All of our children have gone to both public schools and private schools. But I don't think private schools should have a right to take taxpayer money away from public schools at a time when Kaylee Ellis is standing in that classroom. Let me give you another example. I went to a school in Dade County, Florida, where the facilities are so overcrowded, the children have to eat lunch in shifts, with the first shift for lunch starting at 9:30 in the morning. Look,
This is a funding crisis all around the country. There are fewer parents of school-age children in the vote as a percentage of the voting population, and there's the largest generation of students ever. We're in an information age when learning is more important than ever. 90% of our kids go to public schools. We have to make it the #1 priority. Modernize our schools, reduce the class size, recruit new teachers, give every child a chance to learn with one-on-one time in a quality, high-quality, safe school. If it's a failing school, shut it down and reopen it under a new principal with a turnaround team of specialists the way Governor Jim Hunt does in North Carolina. Here's another difference. The governor, if it's a failing school, would leave the children in that failing school for 3 years and then give a little bit of money to the parents, a down payment on a down payment for private school tuition, and pretend that that would be enough for them to go out and go to a private school.
Move
it's
on.
an
30,
illusion.
Wait a minute.
30 seconds, Governor. Right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, most good governance is at the state level. See, here's the mentality. I'm going to make the state do this. I'm going to make the state do that. All I'm saying is if you spend money, show us results, and test every year, which you do not do, Mr. Vice President. You do not test every year. You can say you do into cameras, but you don't, unless you've changed your plan here on the stage. Secondly, and you need to test every year, because that's where you determine whether or not children are progressing to excellence. Secondly, one of the things that we've got to be careful about in politics is throwing money at a system that has not yet been reformed. More money is needed, and I spend more money. But step one is to make sure we reform the system, to have the system in place that leaves no child behind, to stop this business about asking, gosh, how old are you? If you're 10, we're going to put you here. If we're 12, we'll put you here. And start asking the question, what do you know? And if you don't know what you're supposed to know, we'll make sure you do early before it is too late.
Good question. We've been talking about a lot of specific issues. It's often said that in the final analysis, about 90% of being the President of the United States is dealing with the unexpected, not with issues that came up in the campaign. Vice President Gore, can you point to a decision, an action you have taken that illustrates your ability to handle the unexpected, the crisis under fire, etc.?
When the action in Kosovo was dragging on and we were searching for a solution to the problem, our country had defeated the adversary on the battlefield without a single American life being lost in combat, but the dictator Milosevic was hanging on. I invited the former Prime Minister of Russia to my house and took a risk in asking him to get personally involved along with the head of Finland to go to Belgrade and to take a set of proposals from the United States that would constitute basically a surrender by Serbia, but it was a calculated risk that paid off. Now, I could probably give you some other examples of decisions over the last 24 years. I have been in public service for 24 years, Jim, and throughout all that time, the people I have fought for have been the middle-class families, and I have been willing to stand up to powerful interests like the big insurance companies, the drug companies, the HMOs, the oil companies. They have good people, and they play constructive roles sometimes, but sometimes they get too much power. I cast my lot with the people, even when it means that you have to stand up to some powerful interests who are trying to turn the policies and the laws to their advantage. That's you can see it in this campaign. The big drug companies support Governor Bush's prescription drug proposal. They oppose mine because they don't want to get Medicare involved because they're afraid that Medicare will negotiate lower prices for seniors who currently pay the highest prices of all.
Governor Bush?
Well, I've been standing up to big Hollywood, big trial lawyers. What was the question? It was about emergencies, wasn't it?
Well, it was about, well, okay.
You know, as governor, one of the things you have to deal with is catastrophe. I can remember the fires that swept Parker County, Texas. I remember the floods that swept our state. I remember going down to Del Rio, Texas. And I've got to pay the administration a compliment. James Lee Witt of FEMA has done a really good job of
working with governors during times of crisis. But that's the time when you're tested not only, it's the time to test your mettle. It's the time to test your heart when you see people whose lives have been turned upside down. It broke my heart to go to the flood scene in Del Rio where a fellow and his family just got completely uprooted. The only thing I knew to do was to get aid as quickly as possible, which we did with state and federal help, and to put my arms around the man and his family and cry with him. But that's what governors do. Governors are oftentimes found on the front line of catastrophic situations.
New question. There can be all kinds of crises, Governor. Question for you. There could be a crisis, for instance, in the financial area.
Yeah.
The stock market could take a tumble. There could be a failure of a major financial institution. What is your general attitude toward government intervention in such events?
Well, it depends, obviously, but what I would do first and foremost is I would get in touch with the Federal Reserve Chairman, Alan Greenspan, to find out all the facts and all the circumstances. I would have my Secretary of Treasury be in touch with the financial centers, not only here but at home. I would make sure that key members of Congress were called in to discuss the gravity of the situation. And I would come up with a game plan to deal with it. That's what governors end up doing. We end up being problem solvers. We come up with practical, common sense solutions for problems that we're confronted with. And in this case, in case of a financial crisis, I would gather all the facts before I made the decision as to what the government ought or ought not to do.
Vice President Gore?
Yeah, first I want to compliment the governor on his response to those fires and floods in Texas. I accompanied James Lee Witt down to Texas when those fires broke out, and FEMA has been a major flagship project of our reinventing government efforts, and I agree, it works extremely well now. On the international financial crises that come up, my friend Bob Rubin, the former Secretary of Treasury, is here. He's a very close advisor to me and a great friend in all respects. I have had a chance to work with him and Alan Greenspan and others on the crisis following the collapse of the Mexican peso, when the Asian financial crisis raised the risk of worldwide recession that could affect our economy. And now, of course, the euro's value has been dropping, but seems to be under control. But it started for me in the last 8 years when I had the honor of casting the tie-breaking vote to end the old economic plan here at home and put into place a new economic plan that has helped us to make some progress. 22 million new jobs and the greatest prosperity ever, but it's not good enough. And my attitude is, you ain't seen nothing yet. We need to do more and better.
So, Governor, would you agree there is no basic difference here on intervening, the federal government intervening in what might be seen by others to be a private financial crisis if it's that severe?
No, there's no difference on that. There is a difference, though, as to what the economy has meant. I think the economy has meant more for the Gore and Clinton folks than the Gore and Clinton folks have meant for the economy. I think most of the economic growth that has taken place is a result of ingenuity and hard work and entrepreneurship. And that's the role of government, is to encourage that. But in terms of the response to the question, no.
Okay.
Can I comment on that?
You may.
See, you know, I think that the American people deserve credit for the great economy that we have, and it's their ingenuity. I agree with that. But, you know, they were working pretty hard 8 years ago, and they had ingenuity 8 years ago. The difference is we've got a new policy, and instead of concentrating on tax cuts mostly for the wealthy, I want tax cuts for the middle-class families, and I want to continue the prosperity and make sure that it enriches not just the few, but all of our families. Look, we have gone from the biggest deficits to the biggest surpluses. We've gone from a triple-dip recession during the previous 12 years to a tripling of the stock market. Instead of high unemployment, we've got the lowest African-American and lowest Latino unemployment rates ever in history, and 22 million new jobs. But it's not good enough. Too many people have been left behind. We have got to do much more, and the key is job training, education, investments in health care and education, the environment, retirement security, and incidentally, we have got to preserve Social Security, and I am totally opposed
to diverting $1 out of every $6 away from the Social Security Trust Fund, as the governor has proposed, into the stock market. I want new incentives for savings and investment for the young couples who are working hard so they can save and invest on their own on top of Social Security, not at the expense of Social Security as the governor proposes.
2 points. One, a lot of folks are still waiting for that 1992 middle-class tax cut. I remember Vice President saying, just give us a chance to get up there. We're going to make sure you get tax cuts. It didn't happen. And now he's having to say it again. They've had their chance to deliver a tax cut to you. Secondly, the surest way to bust this economy is to increase the role and the size of the federal government. The Senate Budget Committee did a study of the Vice President's expenditures. They've projected that it could conceivably bust the budget by $900 billion. That means he's either going to have to raise your taxes by $900 billion or go into the Social Security surplus for $900 billion. This is a plan that is going to increase the bureaucracy by 20,000 people. His targeted tax cut is so detailed, so much fine print, that it's going to require numerous IRS agents. No, we need somebody to simplify the code, to be fair, to continue prosperity by sharing some of the surplus with the people who pay the bills, particularly those at the bottom end of the economic ladder.
But if I could respond, Jim, what he's quoting is not the Senate Budget Committee. It is a partisan press release by the Republicans on the Senate Budget Committee that's not worth the government, the taxpayer-paid paper that it's printed on. Now, as for 20,000 new bureaucrats, as you call them, you know, the size of the federal government will go down in a Gore administration. In the Reinventing Government program, you just look at the numbers, it is 300,000 people smaller today than it was 8 years ago. Now, the fact is, you're going to have a hard time convincing folks that we were a whole lot better off 8 years ago than we are today. But that's not the question. The question is, will we be better off 4 years from now than we are today? And as for the surest way to threaten our prosperity, having a $1.9 trillion tax cut, almost half of which goes to the wealthy, and a $1 trillion Social Security privatization proposal is the surest way to put our budget into deficit, raise interest rates, and put our prosperity
I can't let the man continue with fuzzy math. It's $1.3 trillion, Mr. Vice President. It's going to go to everybody who pays taxes. I'm not going to be one of these kinds of presidents that said, you get tax relief and you don't. I'm not going to be a pick and chooser. What is fair is everybody who pays taxes ought to get relief.
I thought we cleared this up a while ago. New question on Social Security. Both of you have Social Security reform plans, and we could spend the rest of the evening and 2 or 3 other evenings talking about them in detail. We're not going to do that. But many experts, including Federal Reserve Chairman Greenspan, Vice President Gore, say that it will be impossible for either of you, essentially, to keep the system viable on its own during the coming baby boomer retirement onslaught without either reducing benefits or increasing taxes. Do you disagree?
I do disagree, because if we can keep our prosperity going, if we can continue balancing the budget and paying down the debt, then the strong economy keeps generating surpluses. And here's what I would do. Here's my plan. I will keep Social Security in a lockbox, and that pays down the national debt, and the interest savings I would put right back into Social Security. That extends the life of Social Security for 55 years. Now, I think that it's very important to understand that cutting benefits under Social Security means that people like Winifred Skinner from Des Moines, Iowa, who's here, would really have a much harder time, because there are millions of seniors who are living almost hand to mouth. And you talk about cutting benefits, I don't go along with it. I am opposed to it. I'm also opposed to a plan that diverts $1 out of every $6 away from the Social Security Trust Fund. You know, Social Security is a trust fund that pays the checks this year with the money that's paid into Social Security this year. The governor wants to divert $1 out of every $6 off into the stock market, which means that he would drain $1 trillion out of the Social Security Trust Fund over the, in this generation, over the next 10 years, and Social Security, under that approach, would go bankrupt within this generation. His leading advisor on this plan actually said that would be okay because then the Social Security Trust Fund could start borrowing. It would borrow up to $3 trillion. Now, Social Security has never done that, and I don't think it should do that. I think it should stay in a lockbox, and I'll tell you this, I will veto anything that takes money out of Social Security for privatization or anything else other than Social Security.
Governor?
Well, I thought it was interesting that on the 2 minutes he spent about $1.5 million on my plan, which means he doesn't want you to know that what he's doing is loading up IOUs for future generations. He puts no real assets in the Social Security system. The revenues exceed the expenses in Social Security to the year 2015, which means all retirees are going to get the promises made. So for those of you who he wants to scare into the voting booth to vote for him, hear me loud and clear. A promise made will be a promise kept. And you bet we want to allow younger workers to take some of their own money. See, that's the difference of opinion. The Vice President thinks it's the government's money. The payroll taxes are your money. You ought to put it in prudent, safe investments so that $1 trillion over the next 10 years grows to be $3 trillion. The money stays within the Social Security system. It's a part of the Social Security system. He keeps claiming it's going to be out of Social Security. It's your money. It's a part of your retirement benefits. It's a fundamental difference between what we believe. I want you to have your own asset that you can call your own. I want you to have an asset that you can pass on from one generation to the next. I want to get a better rate of return for your own money than the paltry 2% that the current Social Security Trust gets today. So Mr. Greenspan missed an opportunity to say there's a third way, and that is to get a better rate of return on the Social Security monies coming into the trust. There's $2.3 trillion of surplus that we can use to make sure younger workers have a Social Security plan in the future, if we're smart, if we trust workers, and if we understand the power of the compounding rate of interest.
Here's the difference. I give a new incentive for younger workers to save their own money and invest their own money, but not at the expense of Social Security, on top of Social Security. My plan is Social Security plus. The governor's plan is Social Security minus. Your future benefits would be cut by the amount that's diverted into the stock market, and if you make bad investments, that's too bad. But even before then, the problem hits because the money contributed to Social Security this year is an entitlement. That's how it works. And the money is used to pay the benefits for seniors this year. If you cut the amount going in, 1 out of every $6, then you have to cut the value of each check by 1 out of every $6 unless you come up with the money from somewhere else. I would like to know from the governor, I know we're not supposed to ask each other questions, but I'd be interested in knowing, does that $1 trillion come from the trust fund, or does it come from the rest of the budget?
No. There's enough money to pay seniors today in the current affairs of Social Security. The trillion comes from the surplus. Surplus is more money than needed. Let me tell you what your plan is. It's not Social Security plus, it's Social Security plus huge debt is what it is. You leave future generations with tremendous IOUs. It's time to have a leader that doesn't put off, tomorrow what we should do today. It's time to have somebody to step up and say, look, let's let younger workers take some of their own money and under certain guidelines invest it in the private markets. The safest of federal investments yields 4%. That's twice the amount of rate of return in the current Social Security Trust. There's a fundamental difference of opinion here, folks. With younger worker after younger worker. Here's my call that says, I trust you. And you know what? The issue is changing because seniors now understand that the promise made will be a promise kept. But younger workers now understand we better have a government that trusts them. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Can I respond to that, Jim? This is a big issue. Could we do another round on it?
We're almost out of time.
Well, just briefly, when FDR established Social Security, they didn't call them IOUs. They call it the full faith and credit of the United States. If you don't have trust in that, I do. And if you take it out of the surplus in the trust fund, that means the trust fund goes bankrupt in this generation within 20 years.
Go ahead.
This is a government that thinks a 2% rate of return on your money is satisfactory. It's not. This is a government that says younger workers can't possibly have their own asset. We need to think differently about the issue. We need to make sure our seniors get the promise made. But I want to tell you, if we don't trust younger workers to manage some of their own money with the Social Security surplus, to grow from $1 trillion to $3 trillion, it's going to be impossible to bridge the gap without what Mr. Gore's plan will do, causing huge payroll taxes or major benefit reductions.
New question.
Yes, sir.
Governor Bush, are there issues of character that distinguish you from Vice President Gore?
Well, man loves his wife, and I appreciate that a lot, and I love mine. And the man loves his family a lot, and I appreciate that because I love my family. I think the thing that discouraged me about the Vice President was uttering those famous words, no controlling legal authority. I felt like that there needed to be a better sense of responsibility of what was going on in the White House. I believe they've moved that sign, the buck stops here, from the Oval Office desk to the buck stops here on the Lincoln bedroom, and that's not good for the country. It's not right. We need to have a new look about how we conduct ourselves in office. There's a huge trust. I see it all the time when people come up to me and say, I don't want you to let me down again. And we can do better than the past administration has done. It's time for a fresh start. It's time for a new look. It's time for a fresh start after a season of cynicism. And so I don't know the man well, but I've been disappointed about how he and his administration has conducted the fundraising affairs. You know, going to a Buddhist temple and then claiming it wasn't a fundraiser is just not my view of responsibility.
Vice President Gore?
Well, I think we ought to attack our country's problems, not attack each other. I want to spend my time making this country even better than it is, not trying to make you out to be a bad person. You may want to focus on scandals. I want to focus on results. As I said a couple of months ago, I stand here as my own man, and I want you to see me for who I really am. Tipper and I have been married for 30 years. We became grandparents a year and a half ago. We've got 4 children. I have devoted 24 years of my life to public service, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you entrust me with the presidency, I may not be the most exciting politician, but I will work hard for you every day. I will fight for middle-class families and working men and women, and I will never let you down.
So, Governor, what are you saying when you mention the fundraising scandals or the fundraising charges that involved Vice President Gore? What are you saying that the voters should take from that that's relevant to this election?
I think they ought to factor it in when they make their decision in the voting booth. Who can do a better job? Pardon me?
In what way?
Well, I just, I think that people need to be held responsible for the actions they take in life.
Yeah.
I think that.
Go ahead. Excuse me.
Well, I think that's part of the need for a cultural change. We need to say that each of us need to be responsible for what we do, and people in the highest office of the land must be responsible for decisions they make in life. And that's the way I've conducted myself as governor of Texas, and that's the way I'll conduct myself as president of the United States, should I be fortunate enough to earn your vote.
Are you saying all of this is irrelevant, Vice President Gore, to this election?
I think the American people should take into account who we are as individuals, what our experience is, what our positions on the issues are, what our proposals are. I am asking you again to see me for who I really am. I'm offering you my own vision, my own experience, my own proposals. And incidentally, one of them is this. This current campaign financing system has not reflected credit on anybody in either party. And that's one of the reasons I've said before, and I'll pledge here tonight. If I'm president, the very first bill that Joe Lieberman and I will send to the United States Congress is the McCain-Feingold Campaign Finance Reform Bill. And the reason it's that important is that all of the other issues, whether prescription drugs for all seniors that are opposed by the drug companies, or the Patient's Bill of Rights to take the decisions away from the HMOs and give them to the doctors and nurses opposed by the HMOs and insurance companies, all of these other proposals are going to be a lot easier to get passed for the American people if we limit the influence of special interest money and give democracy back to the American people. And I wish Governor Bush would join me this evening in endorsing the McCain-Feingold campaign finance reform bill.
Governor Bush?
You know, this man has no credibility on the issue. As a matter of fact, I read in the New York Times where he said he co-sponsored the McCain-Feingold campaign fundraising bill. But he wasn't in the Senate with Senator Feingold. And so, look, what you need to know about me is I'm going to uphold the law. I'm going to have an attorney general that enforces the law, that it's the time for campaign funding reform is after the election. This man has outspent me. The special interests are outspending me. And I am not going to lay down my arms in the middle of a campaign for somebody who's got no credibility on the issue.
Senator McCain said, excuse me one sec, Vice President Gore. Senator McCain said in August, it doesn't matter which one of you is President of the United States in January, there's going to be blood on the floor of the United States Senate, and he's going to tie up the United States Senate until campaign finance reform is passed that includes a ban on soft money. First of all, would you support that effort by him, or would you sign a bill that is finally passed that included?
Well, I would support an effort to ban corporate soft money and labor union soft money so long as there was dues checkoff. I've campaigned on this ever since the primaries. I believe there needs to be instant disclosure on the internet as to who's given to whom. I think we need to fully enforce the law. I mean, I think we need to have an attorney general that says if laws are broken, we'll enforce the law. Be strict about it. Be firm about it.
Look, Governor Bush, you have attacked my character and credibility, and I am not going to respond in kind. I think we ought to focus on the problems and not attack each other. And one of the serious problems, hear me well, is that our system of government is being undermined by too much influence coming from special interest money. We have to get a handle on it. And like John McCain, I have learned from experience, and it's not a new position for me. 24 years ago, I supported full public financing of all federal elections. And anybody who thinks I'm just saying it'll be the first bill I send to the Congress, I want you to know I care passionately about this, and I will fight until it becomes law.
I want people to hear what he just said. He is for full public financing of congressional elections. I'm absolutely adamantly opposed to that. I don't want the government financing congressional elections.
I know.
Sorry.
I would just say on that wonderful note of disagreement, we have to stop here, and we want to go now to your closing statements. Governor Bush is first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Jim. Thank the University of Massachusetts. Mr. Vice President, thank you. It's been a good, lively exchange. Obviously, we have huge differences of opinion. Mine is that I want to empower people in their own lives. I also want to go to Washington to get some positive things done. It's going to require a new spirit, a spirit of cooperation. It's going to require the ability of a Republican president to reach out across the partisan divide and to say to Democrats, let's come together to do what's right for America. It's been my record as governor of Texas. It'll be how I conduct myself if I'm fortunate enough to earn your vote as president of the United States. I want to finally get something done on Medicare. I want to make sure prescription drugs are available for all seniors. And I want seniors to have additional choices when it comes to choosing their health care plans. I want to finally get something done on Social Security. I want to make sure that seniors have the promise made will be a promise kept, but I want younger workers to be able to manage some of their own money, some of their own payroll taxes in the private sector under certain guidelines to get a better rate of return on your own money. I want to rebuild our military to keep the peace. I want to have a strong hand when it comes to the United States and world affairs. I don't want to try to put our troops in all places at all times. I don't want to be the world's policeman. I want to be the world's peacemaker by having a military of high morale and a military that's well equipped. I want to have anti-ballistic missile systems to protect ourselves and our allies from a rogue nation that may try to hold us hostage or blackmail a friend. I also want to make sure our education system fulfills its hope and promise. I've had a strong record of working with Democrats and Republicans in Texas to make sure no child is left behind. I understand the limited role of the federal government, but it can be a constructive role when it comes to reform by insisting that there be strong accountability systems. Well, my intentions are to earn your vote and earn your confidence. I'm asking for your vote. I want you to be on my team, and for those of you working, thanks from the bottom of my heart. And for those of you making up your mind, I'd be honored to have your support.
Vice President Gore, 2 minutes.
I want to thank everybody who watched and listened tonight, because this is indeed a crucial time in American history. We're at a fork in the road. We have this incredible prosperity, but a lot of people have been left behind. And we have a very important decision to make. Will we use the prosperity to enrich all of our families and not just the few? One important way of looking at this is to ask, who are you going to fight for? Throughout my career in public service, I have fought for the working men and women of this country, middle-class families. Why? Because you are the ones who have the hardest time paying taxes, the hardest time making ends meet. You are the ones who are making car payments and mortgage payments and doing right by your kids, and a lot of times their powerful forces arrayed against you. And make no mistake about it, they do have undue influence in Washington, D.C., and it makes a difference if you have a president who will fight for you. I know one thing about the position of president. It's the only position in our Constitution that's filled by an individual who is given the responsibility to fight not just for one state or one district or the well-connected or wealthy, but to fight for all of the people, including especially those who most need somebody who will stand up and take on whatever powerful forces might stand in the way. There's a woman named Winifred Skinner here tonight from Iowa. I mentioned her earlier. She's 79 years old. She has Social Security. I'm not going to cut her benefits or support any proposal that would. She gets a small pension, but in order to pay for her prescription drug benefits, she has to go out 7 days a week, several hours a day, picking up cans. She came all the way from Iowa in a Winnebago with her poodle in order to attend here tonight. And I want to tell her, I am going to fight for a prescription drug benefit for all seniors, and I'm going to fight for the people of this country for a prosperity that benefits all.
And we will continue this dialogue next week on October the 11th at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The format then will be more informal, more conversational, with the two candidates seated at a table with me. The third will be October 17th at Washington University in St. Louis, and that will follow a town hall type format. Also ahead, the day after tomorrow, on October 5th, there's the 90-minute debate between the Democratic candidate for Vice President, Senator Joe Lieberman, and the Republican candidate, former Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney. It will be held at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. The moderator will be Bernard Shaw of CNN. Thank you, Governor Bush, Vice President Gore. See you next week. And for now, from Boston, I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
And there you have it. The candidates shook hands. I'm Barry Krieger here at News Center 22. You heard the candidates clash over health care, Medicare, and prescription drug benefits, taxes, and Social Security. It was a lively exchange, as Texas Governor George Bush called it, but it was at the end that we actually heard a little bit of heat. Now, you've seen and heard the candidates. Now let's hear what your neighbors and civic leaders think of what they just saw and heard. We've assembled just such a group in town hall forum style. Sonia Baghdadi is standing by in the next studio. Sonia.
Well, good evening, Barry, and good evening to all of you. The first presidential debate has drawn to a close, and as many of you have probably been at home in your living rooms watching the debate, we have been here in our studios. And as you can see, I am surrounded by a group of people here that we have invited into our studios to watch the debate from here. They are community members. We have with us school officials, we have community activists, high school, college students who've been here drawing their own opinions about the debates, and they've come here to share those opinions with us and let us know whether or not they feel the debate lived up to their expectations. So we're going to give each one a chance to talk to us tonight. We're going to start over to my left right now with Henry Thomas, who is the president and CEO of the Urban League. Thanks for joining us, Henry.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. I thought the debate was a good one. I thought that both candidates spoke distinctly about their differences in their proposals. The issues that relate to the community that is most important to the Urban League constituents, I thought that all the issues that they spoke to were issues that relate to our interests. You know, Medicare, Social Security, education, wealth gap. How do you close the wealth gap? But I think education was the one that really concerns us the most, in that 90% of all kids in this country go to public school, And I thought that Vice President Gore articulated a strategy to improve public education the best.
For the minority population in Western Massachusetts and throughout the U.S.?
Well, again, I think minority issues are majority issues, and I think that he did it in a manner that would be beneficial to all members of public school education.
All right, Henry Thomas, and of course, all of us here probably have different issues and different things that we were focusing on as we were watching the debate. So now we're going to talk to Terry Regina, who I would assume you are the interim Springfield interim school superintendent, that you were focusing on education issues tonight, correct?
I was very interested to see what kinds of comments and plans both Governor Bush and Vice President Gore were willing to present. I was somewhat disappointed in Governor Bush. I felt he was not thorough in his response. He had limited his issues. Vice President Bush seems to understand the complexity of public education, the needs in education reform, and he certainly emphasized the need for accountability and school reform so that we can prepare students for this century. So I was very happy to hear that. I would have liked to have heard a little bit more from both candidates, but I believe Vice President Gore certainly presented a much more comprehensive approach. He did indicate certainly that he thought the voucher system was not a way to go, that it's very limiting in the amount of money that it gives parents, and it's not really a choice. It's only a choice for parents who probably are already using private schools, and that those 90% of the parents who use the public schools of this country need to be supported.
Well, Terry, like yourself, there probably is someone else here who's focusing on education tonight, and that is Diane Purchase, who's joining us now, and you are the parent of 3 learning disabled children. So I would assume your focus is probably on special education, is that right?
Yes, it was, and I liked what Governor Bush had to say about education, but actually I really thought that it was Vice President Gore that won the debate as far as I was concerned. His accountabilities, his making class size a priority. I feel that, especially in special education, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, was found to be in noncompliance in every state in the union, and that we need that accountability issue in special ed and as regular ed as well.
Well, something special tonight is that we have 2 people here in our studio who will be first-time voters in November, so that's kind of exciting. We have 2 seniors at Chicopee High School. We have Kristen Browning and Nate Raymer. Sorry, Nate. We're going to start with Kristen right now, and I'm sure this is exciting for you, being that this will be your first time voting in November. Would you say there were certain issues that did apply to you as a student, a high school student in particular?
Yeah, I definitely say the issues of education were extremely important, and they talked a little bit about financial aid. I would have liked to hear more about that, but considering I'm going to college next year, those issues are extremely important to me. And some of the other issues don't apply so much to, I think, my age group, but they're definitely important to the future, and I think it's important to pay attention to them now.
So you're paying attention to schooling and college loans and things like that. We're going to come back here to Nate. And I remember when I was in high school, I don't know if I was particularly interested in watching presidential debates, Nate, but would you say that there was certain things, issues in the debate that sort of engaged you or drew you in, or maybe that your peers would be even interested in watching it tonight?
Not really. I didn't really think that the majority of the high school students really were interested in the debating at all, really. And I am, the education aspect of the high school, the limiting of the classroom size is pretty important, I think, because a lot of high schools and stuff there, the high schools classrooms are packed and it's not really that fun. And other issues I think are important are like Bush's pay raise for the government. I think that's pretty important for the...
Paying attention to those issues. All right, thank you, Nate. Well, we're going to be back in about 60 seconds. It's time to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to talk to more people tonight, live from our studios. We're going to get more reaction to the presidential debates. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
In 1979, Wally Computer was founded with a vision. Do whatever it takes to provide the customer with the best computer products and services in the region. Wally Computer has matured into a company that can fully support any corporation, regardless of size. We offer aggressive pricing backed by exceptional service, plus high-quality products like the Hewlett-Packard Color LaserJet 4500N printer.
Wally Computer Associates, large enough to handle all your needs, small enough to care.
When you live,
live and work and play in Western Massachusetts, there are great local advantages, like the largest commercial banking team and loans up to $10 million for your business, and Advantage Package Checking with preferred rates, no-fee MasterCards, and borrowing at Prime, all to reward you and protect your assets every time you bank. The Bank of Western Massachusetts, where you're worth more.
And welcome back to 22 News as we bring you this special debate coverage tonight. We've got live coverage here from a group that we've invited into our studios to give us their reaction to the debates tonight. And we're continuing now with Gumersindo Gomez. And you are a longtime community activist, and I would assume in watching the debates tonight and watching the candidates, you're probably looking out for the candidate who can best, provide abilities or opportunities for the Hispanic community. Is that true?
Well, for the Hispanic community and the community as a whole, I was able to appreciate what the Vice President is talking about, bringing more programs in our communities which are definitely needed. And here we got the Texas governor saying, yeah, he's going to throw all this money at us. But what are we going to do with that money if we ain't got the programs? We need the programs in the community where we can help our people. Another part that I really like, as I am a veterans advocate, that we got finally we got a Vietnam veteran that is going to make it in office. And Governor Bush was not able to talk even about being a Boy Scout.
Well, human services have also been an issue in tonight's presidential debates. And next we're going to talk to Reverend Karen Rux. You're the interim director of the Council of Churches of Greater Springfield. And I would assume you were watching the debates and the candidates for these human issues and human needs and health concerns and things of that nature?
That and more, because our membership, our congregants represent the society. So we're concerned with economy, we're concerned with education, we're concerned with foreign relationships, global, from a global perspective. And as others had said, I thought that they both gave a pretty good response, but I was more concerned that Bush was not as clear in how he would deal with issues of economy as they affect the middle class, or in what way would he develop relationships internationally, particularly with two third world countries. I appreciated that Vice President Gore did take more time to outline the education plan, because it has an impact on our constituents, regardless of whether they're attending public school or private school. Our citizens are affected by it.
Okay, and we also can't forget about the businesses here in Western Massachusetts and in the country, and business owners. And here we're going to speak with Russell Denver. You are the president of the Affiliated Chambers of Commerce of Greater Springfield. What do you think these candidates had to offer the businesses?
Well, I think Governor Bush was very clear that he wants to return money to the business owners and to the citizens of the United States, where Vice President Gore wants to return it to the government. There are clear plans laid out by Mr. Bush for tax cuts. The Democrats have had lots of opportunities to return dollars to middle-class Americans, which Mr. Gore talks about, but the Democrats have not allowed the marriage penalty tax to be revoked, nor the estate tax. And those would be return money which would be invested back into businesses. It would be spent by consumers in the country and would promote the economy. I think the Vice President failed miserably.
So you were disappointed in terms of what he had to offer for improving the economy?
Well, he had no plans to improve the economy. And his tax cut proposals, why were they not done during the previous 7 years? He had an energy plan that is new. He had tax cuts which are new. He had education plan which are new. He had an opportunity to do these over the last 7 years, and they failed to do them.
All right, Russell, obviously paying close attention to the debate, not as pleased with what Al Gore had to say. And we're going to get more opinions. When we come back, we're going to take another break. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
When you think of suburban Chevrolet, you think of Southwick. When you think of Southwick, you think of greener pastures and lower prices. And when you think of lower prices, you think of suburban Chevrolet again.
Suburban Chevrolet salutes our nation's athletes for their hard work and commitment to excellence. The same kind of commitment that drives the professionals at Suburban to surpass industry standards for customer satisfaction this year and every year.
Suburban Chevrolet. Some things just cost less in Southwick.
When you live and work and play in Western Massachusetts, there are great local advantages, like the largest commercial banking team, and loans up to $10 million for your business, and Advantage Package Checking, with preferred rates, no-fee MasterCards, and borrowing at Prime, all to reward you and protect your assets every time you bank. The Bank of Western Massachusetts, where you're worth more.
And welcome back to 22 News. We are talking to a group here who is in our studio and was watching the debates in our studio, the political debates tonight, and they've sort of gathered their own opinions about the debates. And we're asking them questions about how they think the candidates fared or who they think basically did a better job. We're talking now, we're going to move over to Jessica Hill, who is a student at the American International College. And as a student, were you focusing mainly on education issues tonight?
No, I wasn't actually, because I'm in college now, so the only thing that would concern me would be tuition. One issue that did catch my attention was abortion, and I think young people my age, especially women, need to focus and learn what's going on with the politicians. Right now, the abortion pill was just passed, and it would affect us greatly. And I think young people also need to realize that any candidates who get in will have justices packed into the Supreme Court who will view their opinions greatly. So Roe versus Wade could be turned over very easily, and I think that would change the nation greatly. And young people need to realize this, and this could affect them greatly if they don't pay attention to the issues. Unfortunately, I believe myself that they don't.
So that would definitely impact who you would decide to vote for.
Oh, of course.
All right, Jessica, now your schoolmate, or classmate, I should say, over here, David Garapy, also you're a freshman at AIC. What would you say were some of the issues that struck you tonight in watching the debate?
I was focusing mainly on education and the military. Both, I think, Governor Bush did a better job on. He focused, as far as the military, we did not do well in Kosovo. I have friends that are in the military. Vice President Gore stated that, the military is in great shape. I beg to differ. I think we do need to raise morale. We need to increase recruiting, and we need to prep them a little bit better. As far as education, again, Vice President Gore talked about teacher testing. I don't think that's going to be effective unless it's actually in the classroom and see what they can do in the room, not on a written test. And finally, I think Governor Bush spoke about young workers and Social Security for the young workers. Just as much as it is the elder generation, we need Social Security as well, and I think we need to make sure that's there for my generation.
I think these are all great issues that everybody's been bringing up, but one particular issue I think that we can't forget is something that's just been a very hot issue and especially major when the debates first started tonight, and that's health care and prescription costs. And we're joined now by Isaac Ben Ezra, who is a member of the Massachusetts Senior Action Council, and that's something that you definitely have interest in.
First of all, I want to thank you for having us. I think it's a real public service that you're including the community, so we have an opportunity to respond. I'm concerned about what I didn't hear tonight. Not one word about 45 million Americans who are presently uninsured. Not one word about the cost of health care and prescriptions that result in rationing health care. Not one word about HMO reform and 2 million seniors and disabled who've been dumped by their Medicare HMOs in the last 2 years. Not one word about my wife and people like my wife who can buy medication in Canada for $1.10 less per pill for American-made brands than we have to spend at our local drugstore. And I think Governor Bush has ignored the last 8 years in more ways than one. Since 1994, we've had a Republican-led Congress. So I think, with all due respect to Governor Bush, the Republicans and the Clinton administration have to share the blame for no health care reform in America in the last 6 years. And as a matter of fact, they combined to take $150 billion out of our Medicare system that has decimated the home care industry, particularly in Massachusetts. People who are able to stay home as a result of home care have been forced into nursing homes. Hospitals have closed. We have crowded conditions now with less beds, and nurses have to do more. And so I think the issue still has to be addressed.
All right, Isaac, thank you for your comments. And last but finally not least, we have President of the NAACP Springfield branch Darnell Williams, and I would assume that tonight you were probably focusing as you were watching the debates on who could provide the best quality of life for the minority communities.
Well, I think that our concern and focus is who would provide the best presidential leadership in areas of foreign policy. How do we deal with the prosperity that is in our hands right now as a nation? And clearly, I think the debate gave us an opportunity to see the policy developments, the depth, the comprehension of the role of the president. And clearly, in my opinion, I think that Governor Bush did not present himself in a way that he was convincing on the issues of how he would share that prosperity, how he would deal with education, how he would deal with the health care issues, and leaving our country better off. And so I think that Vice President Gore clearly articulated a vision and a plan that showed, in my mind, that he laid the plans for making sure that as president, what he would veto, who he would appoint to the Supreme Court. I think all of these enormous issues that have a great capacity to impact our nation was clearly laid out today, and people around the world and the country clearly saw where the leader was.
All right, Darnell, thank you very much. And we're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we're going to open up some general questions to everyone here to let us know how they felt about the debate. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Early risers need early news. 22 News First Look. The first local newscast on at 5 a.m. Marianne Ward, Anita Wilson, and meteorologist Brian Lapis, ready to help you start your day informed. Local news, weather every 10 minutes, and reports you'll find only on the News Leader. 22 News already brings you the most local news coverage in Western Massachusetts. Now we're bringing you even more. First Look, now at 5 a.m. 22 News, the News Leader, working for you.
When you live and work and play in Western Massachusetts, there are great local advantages, like the largest commercial banking team and loans up to $10 million for your business, and Advantage Package Checking with preferred rates, no-fee MasterCards, and borrowing at Prime, all to reward you and protect your assets every time you bank. The Bank of Western Massachusetts, where you're worth more.
And welcome back to 22 News as we get live reaction from people who are watching the political debates in our studios tonight. And we've been talking about what people observed in watching the debates, but now we're going to talk a little bit about what you didn't observe. I mean, were there any issues among any of you that you were hoping that people would address and the candidates didn't address them at all? We're going to start right here.
Yes, two issues. The whole issue of violence, not just in terms of gun control, but in terms of what's happening in our schools, violence as it relates to the entertainment industry and the impact that it has, especially on our young people. The other area that I would have liked to have heard more about is how are we going to manage and support and empower our people who are poor in employment, in education, in housing, in safer communities, and how to get out of poverty, how to combat the systemic issues as well as the perceptions that reinforce it.
Okay, I realize that Darnell Williams over here also had his hand up, so we're going to go over and what were you hoping to see in the debate?
I was actually hoping to see that Governor Bush and Vice President Gore would address racial profiling for African Americans and Latino across the country who are being affected by this aggressive, assertive policy across our country. So I was a little disappointed that that was not addressed.
And Isaac Ben Ezra, you had something to say as well?
Yeah, I don't think we've addressed that we should leave no child or family behind. We haven't talked about affordable housing tonight. And the Bush prescription proposal relies on the same insurance industry that's dumping millions of seniors and disabled persons. That's not a Medicare plan. We need a plan through Medicare that's universal, so everybody's entitled to prescriptions at a reasonable price.
Now, probably the most basic question of tonight is who do you guys think came out on top? I mean, who do you guys think really succeeded here? Henry Thomas?
I thought it was pretty much a slam dunk in the favor of Vice President Gore. He was more articulate. He showed a command over the facts. Governor Bush was very, very soft on the facts, and in response to any criticisms or points that Gore made, he did not respond with substantive responses. He gave basically attack responses, personal attack.
Terry Regina, you also had your hand up over here. Who do you think that fared the best in tonight's presidential debate?
I would agree that Vice President Gore came on top. He had a clarity of vision. He had sound ability to relate the facts, and he seemed to be much more in command.
I see a lot of nodding heads here. I have a feeling that's a consensus. We have another hand up.
Yes, I too believe that by some President Gore won this debate hands down. Governor Bush was a lot about the fuzzy math and a lot of the terminology he used. He was just saying scare cat tactics and things like that. He just didn't win. And I really think that the issue of abortion has to be at the forefront too. And he was all around the fact that he will take away Roe versus Wade.
All right, we have one more person, so we've got time to talk to Russ Denver. You had your hand up.
Well, I clearly disagree with the other people on the panel. I think that the vice president was using scare tactics. He continually said that the top 1% would receive income tax benefits. Governor Bush's plan covers everyone. He was consistently saying that, consistently said that throughout the entire debate, and the vice president refused to accept that. I think that Governor Bush laid out a plan that will affect all Americans to the positive.
We have a lot of nodding yeses. We've got some nodding noes, and that's all the time we have right now. A lot of differing opinions tonight, but hopefully this has helped to shed some light on what the people of Western Massachusetts are looking for in a person who will soon represent our country. But our coverage continues on 22 News at 11. Time to turn it over to Barry Krieger. Barry.
All right, thank you very much, Sonia. And there you have it. And good evening, and welcome now to 22 News at 11. I am Barry Krieger. All eyes tonight, as you have been seeing, we're on UMass Boston this evening as the presidential candidates finally faced off in the first of their 3 scheduled debates. George Bush and Al Gore clashed, for the most part, politely, but made their policy differences known. We have 22 News team coverage with Dan Elias and Brenda Garten. Brenda Garten is standing by live in Boston, and she kicks off our team coverage tonight from there. Brenda?
Well, Barry, if you didn't know the issues prior to tonight's debate, you certainly do now. They talked about everything from health care and Social Security, the military, Medicare, both of them hitting home on those particular issues. The feeling that we're getting from the city of Boston is that Gore did win tonight's debate. However, Bush advisors are saying that their candidate was indeed very successful as well. For more on our team coverage, we go live to Dan Elias, who's at Debate Hall at the University of Massachusetts, Boston campus. Dan? I understand Dan is standing by there at the campus, gathering information and gathering reaction there from Debate Hall. Dan, are you there? We do have Dan Elias. As we're having audio technical difficulties there from the campus site, we'll be going to Dan in just a moment. I want to tell you that do you remember right when the debate first started that Gore came out and questioned Bush's experience to be even president of the country, and then Bush came right back and criticized Gore's wanting to increase the government size. Medicare, again, key factors in the debate. Bush wanted to take more government out of the health care, saying Gore's plan is a Medicare. We heard that term Medicare over and over again tonight, while Gore's saying that the government needs to help people pay for more prescriptions. Health care appears to be a key issue. Both Gore and Bush say their own plan for health care will be the one to ease the financial burden and people paying for health care and their medical bills all across the country. It's certainly a concern for people here in Massachusetts. Bush attacked Gore, saying he's already had his chance to prove himself.
Years ago, they campaigned on prescription drugs for seniors. And 4 years ago, they campaigned on getting prescription drugs for seniors. And now they're campaigning on getting prescription drugs for seniors. It seems like they can't get it done. Now, they may blame other folks, but it's time to get somebody in Washington who's going to work with both Republicans and Democrats to get some positive things done when it comes to our seniors.
Under the Medicare prescription drug proposal I'm making, here's how it works. You go to your own doctor, and your doctor chooses your prescription, and no HMO or insurance company can take those choices away from you. Then you go to your own pharmacy, you fill the prescription, and Medicare pays half the cost. If you're in a very poor family or if you have very high costs, Medicare will pay all the costs.
The vice president hitting home the point that he said he brought in a man to the audience here at the UMass Campus Center who goes to Canada, in fact, to get his health care because he's not getting it in this country. And Bush said that Gore's just providing fuzzy numbers, as he called it, fuzzy numbers and fuzzy math to throw out that kind of information. But Barry, indeed, the candidates also clashed on tax cuts and what to do with the surplus here in our country, and I know you have more on that reaction.
Said that Gore's economic plan would lead to dramatically bigger government with 200 new or expanded programs and 20,000 new bureaucrats. Bush agreed that he did not have a lot of Washington experience, but he called that a plus. Al Gore says Bush's inexperience will cost the country.
I think abortions ought to be more rare in America, and I'm worried that that pill will create more abortion, will cause more people to have abortions. What I do believe is we can find good common ground on issues like parental notification or parental consent. And I know we need to ban partial birth abortions. This is a place where my opponent and I have strong disagreements.
And Governor Bush has declared to the anti-choice groups that he will appoint justices in the mold of Scalia and Clarence Thomas, who are known for being the most vigorous opponents of a woman's right to choose. Here's the difference. He trusts the government to order a woman to do what it thinks she ought to do. I trust women to make the decisions that affect their lives, their destinies, and their bodies. All right, of course, that was the debate on abortion right there. Right now, I believe we've cleared up our audio difficulties, and Dan Elias is standing by. Dan, you actually went inside the hall tonight, so you kind of got a flavor of what it was like.
Sure did, Barry. We're certainly going to hear the clips and analysis throughout this evening and through the next days. Just wanted to give you a flavor of what it was like here at the Clark Athletic Center, where just one flight down, the gymnasium was turned into this debating hall this evening. First of all, it was certainly a full house, of course. This ticket very difficult to come by in this city that just loves politics for a debate that the whole nation was watching. Very crowded in there, not a seat to spare. And we certainly saw a lot of very familiar faces there this evening. A lot of members of the Kennedy family. Of course, the JFK Library is adjacent to this property. So Carolyn Kennedy Schlossberg, for example. Jesse Jackson was there this evening. Saw Mike and Kitty Dukakis as well. Just some of the luminaries in the audience this evening. You know, we were told, the audience was, that we were to be observers of history and not participants in it, by which the moderator Jim Lehrer was saying to withhold our applause and laughter throughout, except for the beginning when the candidates were greeted, and at the very conclusion, and really for the most part, the audience did just that. You know, we mentioned earlier, too, that these debates often really are remembered for the quips and the remarks made and not so much for the policy discussed. I'd have to say that that is quite the opposite in this one. I didn't note any of those. It'll be memorable lines from this debate. Instead, I noticed that there was a lot of discussion of the minute details of policy that's going to come up in this election. We want to get the opinion of someone else here who is inside the hall. It is Congressman Richard Neal from our district. Congressman Neal, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here, Dan.
You know, a lot of people want to know, first of all, who do you think might have won this debate?
Well, I think the specificity and the clarity of the Vice President's answers tonight, I thought that was superb. I thought that he was very able to depict the differences between the two candidates on Social Security, on Medicare, on education and the environment, and certainly a prescription drug benefit.
A lot of people thought that if George W. Bush would just hold his own, that he would be considered the winner because the expectations were low for him. He certainly seemed to do that tonight, didn't he?
On the front page of the New York Times this morning, there was a poll that was made very public, in which 73% of the American people said they believed that Al Gore was ready to be president of the United States. 49% of the American people said that Vice President Gore was prepared, that Vice President Bush was prepared to be president. Tonight, those numbers were only reinforced.
What do you think is going to happen in our next debate? Do you think that, for example, this actually moved the race? Do you think that there's a lot of attention paid to the next debate?
73 million Americans watched this debate tonight. There will not be 73 million Americans watching the next debate. This was the big game. This was the Super Bowl tonight. Clearly, I think the Vice President's numbers will move after tonight. I think that he demonstrated a full grasp of the issues that confront the American people.
Neal, thank you very much for joining us here this evening at the Clark Center, the site of this evening's debate. Well, time will tell. You know, often the reactions change over the few days after a debate as to the public perceptions. Of course, we have quite a few from our audience already this evening here in our studio. Well, reporting live from the site of the first presidential debate here at UMass in Boston, Dan Elias, 22 News. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Dan, great job, and I have to say that probably no surprise that our Democratic congressman thought that Al Gore came up top in the debate, but thank you very much. I'm sure we'll hear more from the people in our studio audience. Now, as we showed you earlier, we did ask a panel of local leaders to watch and discuss the debate. Brenda?
That's right. The issues in western Massachusetts may be very differently than the rest of the country. Gun control. How does somebody who works at Smith & Wesson feel about gun control from the candidates? Education with the key colleges we have in Greater Springfield. Health care with the 2 hospitals in Springfield and also Greater Springfield with Noble and Mercy and Holyoke Hospital. To get more of that information, we go to our studio audience that we had polled immediately after the debate, and Sonia Baghdadi is here with more on that. Sonia?
Brenda, as you've been covering the debate in Boston, I have been here talking with community members. And first, we're going to come over and talk to Russ Denver. And we're going to talk to you about Congressman Neal. We just had him on the air, who was talking about Gore, who he believes basically came out on top. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I have a great deal of respect for Congressman Neal and his efforts on behalf of the local business community. I obviously disagree with him. I think, as I stated earlier, I thought Mr. Bush had a clear plan for returning dollars to average Americans and Americans of all income, where money would be reinvested. The Vice President wants to put the money or keep the money with the government, and he believes the government is a better thinker when it comes to spending people's money. That's a fundamental difference between a Republican and a Democrat. I believe that the Americans are smart enough to decide how to spend their dollars, and if they are returned to them, that will promote the economy, not only on Main Street in Springfield and Chicopee and South Hadley, but nationally as well.
We're also going to talk to Gumersindo Gomez, and you weren't very pleased with how some of the issues were handled in tonight's debate.
Well, especially we again were able to appreciate the negative point from the governor. He was very negative in many of the issues. Then in contrast, we saw the Vice President commending him many times on some of the issues. So I just can't agree with this negative campaign that this governor is trying to put on this American folks.
And a final issue that we're talking about, we're going to come over to Isaac Ben Ezra, and you were talking about the fairness of having all the candidates actually be included in the debate tonight.
Right. Tonight's debate demonstrated, I think, to a lot of Americans, hopefully, that the democratic process and the American people would have been better served if it had included Ralph Nader and Pat Buchanan. And I hope the American people will say to the 2 major parties, we don't want stage appearances, we want a real democratic debate. It's not too late to include Ralph, not too late to include Pat. Thank you very much.
All right, Isaac, thank you very much. And you heard it. Here are some opinions to the presidential debate tonight from community members in our studio. Barry, we're going to toss it back to you.
Right now here in Boston, Sonia, both parties are planning their victory celebrations. Both parties think that their candidate indeed won, although the feeling that we're getting overall of the debate is that Gore was the slight winner here tonight. Both broke those rules that you saw here earlier, going past the 3-minute marker that Jim Lehrer spelled out with the debate commission earlier. Also, some other issues they talked about, the military and when use of force would be appropriate. Bush blamed Gore for too much polling, and that's how he would set policy. Bush actually repeated himself a couple of times using a family of 4 from Massachusetts and their scenario of making $50,000 a year and not being able to afford for health care. We have a poll also from western Massachusetts on how our local voters voted. We have them from our website at WWLP.com. People could click on and vote. Was that the winner that I'm receiving now, the latest information we have, is that Gore won 41%. Sorry, it was Bush at 59% and Gore at 41%. The numbers are just coming into me now, so bear with me. But that is the latest polling that we have from those of you who chose to click on to our website. And Barry, I know our local reaction continues there from Chicopee.
Well, our 22 News interactive poll certainly runs counter to the way Congressman Neal characterized the debate tonight and the way some of the pundits are, but there it is. And of course, we have to emphasize that, of course, that this is a voluntary poll, and that is how you described it, Brenda. Those who chose to click on, it was a majority of the people that chose Governor Bush. On other debate-related matters, Green Party candidate Ralph Nader, who was denied entrance into the debate tonight. Nader did have a ticket. Someone gave him a ticket, a student, but he was stopped at the door by a debate commission representative who told him it had already been decided he was unwelcome at the debate, ticket or not. These are the pictures of Nader being stopped at the door. Nader and other smaller party candidates have been excluded from the debate because they do not have the required 15% support in national polls. Reform Party candidate Patrick Buchanan also is in Boston tonight. He also did not make it into the debate hall. Little Danville, Kentucky may not be as big as Boston, but big preparations are underway there for another debate. Vice presidential candidates will square off at the town's Norton Center for the Arts Thursday. The center stage has been turned into a huge television studio. The town plans to close most roads during the Norton Center during the debate. One Westfield State College graduate who leads a rather colorful life as a State Department security agent returned to his alma mater today. Kevin Perry keeps Secretary of State Madeleine Albright out of harm's way. Perry's role as State Department Secret Service agent also includes protecting foreign dignitaries. Perry says he knows what the Secret Service went through before, during, and after tonight's presidential debate.
I mean, I can understand the stress that those guys will be going through this week. It's going to be pretty hectic, you know, dealing with the motorcades and the traffic issues that are going to take place, especially with the big dig going on in Boston right now.
If Perry's job as a special agent for the diplomatic security seems appealing, well, he probably proved successful in recruiting students during today's Criminal Justice Career Fair at Westfield State. This has indeed been a day and night of politics. So I want to once again thank and congratulate my partners Dan Elias and Brenda Garden. Brenda, fine piece of work tonight.
Well, Barry, the parties have just begun here in Boston for both candidates. I think a lot of people would be up all night long here in Boston celebrating how their candidates did. Remember, going into the debate now, Gore did have the lead on the latest poll, ahead by 6 points with a 3-point margin of error. So we'll see what happens, although that is not what voters in Western Massachusetts thought from our website that we took there locally. We'll have to wait and see. No really knockout punches here tonight, but certainly very educational and informative. What's most important is you, the voter, were able to see for 90 minutes straight how the candidates felt about the issues. No sound bites, no campaign commercials, but they spoke from the heart, and that's what matters. And 22 News, proud to present it to you live from Boston here tonight with our team coverage. Barry, we'll send it on back to you now in Chicopee.
All right, Brenda, it's how the candidates felt and how they handled themselves, and the decision will be in the ballot box come next month. Brenda, thank you very much. We will have much more on 22 News right after this break.
With its multi-link suspension, it's no surprise Ford Focus handles like a sports car. However, Focus also has a huge interior, which is something you don't see every day in a small car. Lease a Ford Focus ZX3 for just $199 a month with $1,850 due at signing. Only from your New England Ford dealer.
You're a full-time, loyal employee with health and pension benefits. Then one day, for no good reason, you're replaced by a part-time or temporary worker who doesn't get these benefits. It's a story affecting too many people. I'm Bill Galvin, Secretary of State. You can stand up and change this system. How? By registering to vote. Even large companies can't compete with your power to vote. Use it. Protect what you've earned.
Dad,
Hmm?
can we go eat at Friendly's?
Or did you clean your room?
Uh-huh.
Or did you do your homework?
Yes, I sure did.
Did you rebuild my carburetor?
Yep.
Did you do my tax return?
Kids will do anything for a trip to Friendly's because we have the best kids menu filled with the stuff kids love. And each kid's meal comes with a free sundae. Every time, each day. And now for a limited time, all kids' meals are just $2.99.
I've always been set in my ways. So when Subaru told me they were changing my Outback, I was a tad concerned. Truth is, they just made it better. This next generation Outback's got a stylish new body, quieter ride, and their best all-wheel driving system ever. Sort of inspired me to make a few changes. I think this works. The Outback, the world's first sport utility wagon from Subaru.
Oh yes, a brilliant move. Galvez scampering across the goal to stop it.
They just couldn't seem to get enough players forward before. He's showing good fluid movement. Right, left. This is another aggressive charge down the flank. He's turned his run to absolute perfection. Two defenders to beat. He's passed one. This is looking like a chance. Yes, he takes the shot in.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Time for the 22 News Health Watch. African Americans make up 13% of the overall population, but constitute 49% of the AIDS cases. That statistic has public health officials across the country alarmed. Dr. Dina Dell has more on the Health Watch.
Sonora Dillon is leading a full and busy life even as she battles AIDS.
I stay busy. I work primarily with women and their families that are affected by the virus, HIV. I'm a housing advocate. I'm also an insurance agent, so I do a number of things.
Dillon especially wants fellow African Americans to hear her message: practice safe sex and get tested if you are sexually active.
The Centers for Disease Control reveals that despite a 20% decline overall in the number of AIDS-related deaths, the mortality rate among African Americans is 10 times that of their white counterparts. The data suggests that African Americans are often diagnosed in later stages of the disease, meaning they may not be accessing early and potentially life-saving treatment.
We need to be doing more in terms of letting people understand what they can do to protect themselves, but also once people are infected, we need access to treatment.
To combat that, clinics offering state-of-the-art AIDS treatment, like this Oakland, California facility, named after basketball superstar Magic Johnson, are conducting special outreach to African Americans.
People need to understand that there is now hope. We have powerful tools, drugs, medications that can block down the AIDS virus and help people regain their lives.
So today we've got to be educated. We've got to educate each other, because you don't know whose life you might save. You might save your own.
The bottom line in AIDS prevention: use condoms and get tested regularly. I'm Dr. Dina Dell.
Doctor says AIDS testing is quick and confidential. If you are uninsured, call your local county health department to access free or low-cost testing. Major League Baseball playoffs are underway. Rich Tettemer has the highlights from tonight's games. But first, blue chips held on to small gains today, but the Texan bonds sold off as the Fed warned inflation still hangs over the U.S. economy.
And get ready, we've got some showers on the way, and we also have a cold spell headed in here as well. Details coming right up.
It was April 1975, and it was the night before Saigon fell. My father was a pilot in the South Vietnamese Air Force, flew my family to freedom. He knew that the best chance that we had for any future would be to flee to America. It was always in my mind that I was going to be a physician. I'm 100% UMass. UMass Lowell, UMass Amherst, and UMass Medical School. Thanks to UMass, my dreams of becoming a doctor came true. UMass is definitely part of the American dream.
The University of Massachusetts, because we all have dreams.
With its multi-link suspension, it's no surprise Ford Focus handles like a sports car. However, Focus also has a huge interior, which is something you don't see every day in a small car. Lease a Ford Focus ZX3 for just $199 a month with $18.50 due at signing, only from your New England Ford dealer.
It's the 25th anniversary tent sale at Fran Johnson's Nevada Bob's. Incredible savings in golf and racket sports equipment with the quality and service you've come to know over the years.
I just remember looking at some of the sets that they had displayed. They pointed me in the right direction, and they got me the clubs at a reasonable price. They still maintain the same service and same quality.
Service, quality, and savings this weekend at Fran Johnson's Nevada Bob's tent sale.
We love Bickford's for lunch. My favorite is the Turkey Club. My husband loves the Burger Banquet.
Bickford's is great for a business lunch, and I can get breakfast, too.
The kids love Bickford's variety.
The price is right, and so are the portions.
Really great food, really friendly people. Hey, they bake their own turkey.
There's a lot to love about Bickford's. Visit your nearest Bickford's restaurant today.
Bickford's, breakfast anytime.
The weather is brought to you by ValiseAuto.com.
I still remember how she spent the hours speeding down the highway of childhood imagination, and how she realized early on the importance of caring for something valuable. There's been hard times along the way, but thanks to Valise, I could afford the graduation present I'd always dreamed of giving her. Now I can be sure she'll arrive at the future she's always imagined.
Welcome back to 22 News at 11. Morning commute tomorrow, sunny, dry roads, 50 to 54. Looks A-OK. Right now, starlit skies, 61 degrees. The dew point at 45, and that's how low the temperature could go, given we have calm winds and clear skies. We've got the clear skies, but we do have a light westerly breeze, and we will make it into the upper 40s to near 50 degrees overnight tonight. A little area of high pressure giving us the dry weather tonight and during the first half or most of the day tomorrow. We do have a frontal system, though, back to the west, and also an associated low pressure area. And this is really packed with moisture here. Lots of thunderstorms going on right now over the central and northern plains. And here it is, heading towards Chicago right now. So a good area of moisture. That's going to be heading in our neck of the woods by tomorrow evening and into tomorrow night around this time. Let's look at it. The radar cast in motion showing that rainfall approaching and sliding right into New England by tomorrow night. Then Thursday looks like a fairly dry day again. More showers move in Thursday night into Friday. So and a couple of areas of moisture heading our way. Starlit skies tonight, 44 to 48. No problems out there. Northwesterly wind. Tomorrow, we'll be clouding it up. Temperatures in the middle to upper 60s, possibly touching 70 degrees. Morning sun, afternoon clouds, and even some evening showers approaching with that frontal system off to the south. Then Thursday's dry, 64 for high. Friday, more showers around, a high of 60, and then it really cools down. I talked about a cold spell. 30s for lows and 40s for highs by Sunday. So it just gets cooler and cooler and colder by the time we get to Sunday. Get ready.
All right, well, today was nice. I'll cherish that for a while.
And tomorrow will be okay as well.
All right, thanks, Nick. Sports is just ahead on 22 News. The baseball postseason has begun in Oakland. Yankees resume their quest to win 3 straight world championships as they take on the upset-minded Athletics. And the Celtics make a trade. But they really can't talk about it just yet. Rich Tuttimer explains when we come back to 22 News.
With its multi-link suspension, it's no surprise Ford Focus handles like a sports car. However, Focus also has a huge interior, which is something you don't see every day in a small car. Lease a Ford Focus ZX3 for just $199 a month with $18.50 due at signing. Only from your New England Ford dealer.
So you ready for the Ramaco pitch, man? Are you kidding me? I am stoked. We're going to blow those guys right out of the water. Hey, why don't you watch yourself? Sorry. Jeez. My friend, 5 minutes after this pitch, those other agency boneheads won't know what hit them. Oh, yeah. All I can say is, wait till they get a load of me.
What could be more satisfying in the morning than a Dunkin' Donuts bagel? Stop by Dunkin' Donuts today and buy 6 freshly baked bagels for just $2.99.
That is so sweet.
Hey, here's your free phone for making the donation.
Want a free digital phone? Donate $20 to Special Olympics from Cellular One.
If you've been hurt, on the job, or on the road, you don't need a lawyer. You need an army. There's only one area law firm big enough and smart enough to fight those huge insurance companies and corporation giants. Pellegrini, Seeley, Ryan, and Blakesley. This army's been winning personal injury cases for over 40 years. A dozen trial lawyers, researchers, investigators, experts. From catastrophic injuries to slips and falls. Pellegrini, Seeley, Ryan, and Blakesley. This army wins.
22 News, your local news leader, working for Palmer.
My turn. The power and performance of rigid wet-dry vacs. Built so heavy-duty, they carry a lifetime warranty. Like our 16-gallon vac that converts to a 210-mile-per-hour blower in seconds. And the Home Depot's got it for just $99 every day. Rigid. Buy it at the Home Depot.
Welcome back. The big debate in baseball is whether or not the Yankees can win their third consecutive World Championship. On the right, we have Yankee fans who think they can. On the left, we have you and me who hope they won't. Let's go to Oakland and check out the highlights. Roger Clemens takes to a 2-0 lead. Can't hold it as the A's score 3 in the 5th. Randy Velarde, the former Yankee, ties the score 2-2 with his RBI single. Then Clemens will throw one in the dirt. It's a pass ball, wild pitch. It's by Jorge Posada. And Oakland has a 3-2 lead. Now, the Yankees tied up with a sac fly in the 6th, but in the bottom of the inning, 2-on, 2-out, Ramon Hernandez delivers a double. That scores 1 run to make it 4-3. Yankees make the perfect relay home. O'Neill to Martinez to Posada to nail Jeremy Giambi at the plate, but the A's have a 4-3 lead. They build on that with a single run in the 8th inning, and they get the final ounce just moments ago. The A's win Game 1 of this best-of-5, beating Roger Clemens and the Yankees 5-3. Was the final. Also in the American League this afternoon at Comiskey Park, it's the Mariners and the White Sox. Game 1 of this series tied 4-4 in the 10th when Edgar Martinez hits a 2-run shot off Keith Folk in the top of the 10th inning. Then John Olerud follows with a solo home run of his own. Back-to-back home runs off Folk, and the Mariners have a 7-4 lead. Sasaki makes that hold up in the bottom of the 10th inning. He gets the last 3 outs, and the Mariners get the jump in this series. 7-4 the final. In 10, Game 2 is tomorrow in Chicago. In the National League, the Atlanta Braves and the St. Louis Cardinals started things off with a wild first inning in the Gateway City. Greg Maddux is a surefire Hall of Famer, but he comes up empty more often than not in the postseason. Mark McGwire sitting out this series with tendonitis in his right knee, available for pinch hitting duties only, but the Cardinals did not need him today, especially in the first inning. Jim Edmonds gets credit for a single when Andrew Jones misplays this ball, and the Cardinals have a 1-0 lead. It gets worse for the Braves. They make mistakes in the field. Chipper Jones with the error, and the Cardinals score 6 runs off Maddux in the first. Rick Ankiel almost cops it up when he has 5 wild pitches in the third, gives up 4 runs in all, 5 wild pitches. But the Cardinals hang on. He's not even close. 7-5 was the final. The Cardinals win the game, and they get the jump in that series. Game 2 is Thursday in St. Louis. Edmonds also hit a home run right there. Also, the Celtics are about to make a trade that includes Chris Herring coming from the Denver Nuggets to the Celtics, but we have to wait till October 16th because Robert Pack was part of an NBA trade before, and they have a 60-day limit.
Called the quiet period.
The quiet period.
All right, thank you, Rich.
All right.
Let's check the lottery numbers as we go to break. Your Massachusetts Daily game up. 4625, Connecticut Nightly, 964, Connecticut Play 4, 1705. Classic Lotto, 15, 18, 21, 22, 27, 42. The big game, 16, 25, 32, 33, 40. Big money ball, 4.
Big wide world-class markets. Best sales week after week guaranteed.
Our children are really important to us, so we took them into consideration when we were looking for a car. The Elantra offers plenty of safety features. Airbags.
Power windows, power locks, power brakes. Peace of mind with the Hyundai was a big factor.
The warranty's the best in America.
There's nothing that really compares to it out in the marketplace right now. It's a great family vehicle.
Get as low as 3.9% APR financing on the Elantra at your Hyundai dealer now.
Hold your hand even higher and into the fire we go.
Bloodshed. Betrayal. Beheading. Lots
a laughs. The Scarlet Pimpernel.
Coming to the Bushnell for 8 performances only. Call now for tickets.
For local news, Springfield visits the news leader, WWLP.com.
While most Dodge Dakota owners use their truck to haul stuff here and there, a certain forward-thinking California town has found a different use for their Dakota. They use it to haul down speeders. Dodge Dakota. Different.
Looking for a little more excitement this season? Enjoy the most football with DirecTV and FL Sunday Ticket at Circuit City. You'll get up to 13 games every Sunday, and right now you can save up to $400. Get your DirecTV system at Circuit City, subscribe to Total Choice Platinum programming and NFL Sunday Ticket, and get free months of Total Choice Platinum. Plus, save $100 on standard professional installation and up to $40 on powered antennas. Now at Circuit City.
Here it is, results from our 22 News interactive poll. Those of you who decided to click on your choice for who won tonight's debate. According to the people who powered up their computers tonight, they said 59% of them thought Bush got the best of the debate. 41% went to Gore. You will have to decide for yourself next month. That'll do it for us tonight on 22 News at 11. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow morning. First look at 5. Good night.
You're watching NBC, America's late-night leader.
From the NBC studios in Burbank, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Featuring Kevin Eubanks and The Tonight Show Band. And me,